All right, Shabbat Shalom. Good morning, everyone. We're live now, and today's Torah portion is called Ki Tisa, and that is when you take. It means when you take, and it comes from Exodus chapter 30, starting in verse 11, and it goes to chapter 34 in verse 35. And so we have also a passage from in the prophets today from 1 Kings chapter 18, verses 1 through 39. And some passages in the Brit Hadasha, New Testament, in Matthew chapter 9, verse 35 to chapter 11, verse 1. And then we have a passage from the book of Acts chapter 7, verses 35, and that goes to chapter 8, verse 1. And then we have a passage in 2 Corinthians chapter 3, and that's the whole chapter, verses 1 through 18. Okay, so Ki Tisa, this is going to cover, this is going to talk about the ransom that they pay the men 20 years old and up to pay as an atonement for themselves, the half shekel. According to the sanctuary, it's going to cover the holy anointing oil and the incense, the recipes for those, and those are set apart. It's going to talk about Bezalel and Aholiab, how they were anointed with the Spirit in the oversight and building of the Mishkan tabernacle and all the implements and everything there. And then we're going to get into the account of the golden calf and all and the tragedy of that event. So we'll go ahead and start here on Exodus chapter 30, verse 11. Would someone like to start us off with the reading after we open in prayer here? Who would like to start us off with the reading today? Brother John. Connection is not good. Okay. All right. I'll start that first chapter, and then we'll see who wants to read after that. So let's open in prayer.
Oh, I was talking this whole time. I didn't realize my mic was muted.
Oh, that's okay.
So I'll read that. Go ahead, pray, and if you pray, I'll start.
Okay. All right, Father, yeah, we thank you for another Shabbat. We can gather and read your word together. We pray that you just bring out your truth out of your words here for us to hide in our hearts. We don't sin against you as we read your Torah instructions, Father, and from the prophets and from the New Testament as well. And we pray for shalom this morning. We pray that if anyone here has aught in their heart against another, that they can lay that down, let it go, and come into this morning's study with just an open heart for studying your word and for worshiping you, Father. And we're just going to lay everything else aside, and we pray against the enemy from interfering with our study today. In Yeshua's name, amen. All right, Brother John, you want to start us off on Exodus chapter 30, verse 11? Just let us know what version you're reading from, and we'll follow along with what we have, okay?
Sure thing. I'm reading from the New American Standard Version. Okay. The Lord also spoke to Moses, saying, "When you take a census of the sons of Israel to number them, then each one of them shall give a ransom for himself to the Lord. When you number them, that there may be no plague among them when you number them. This is what everyone is numbered shall give: half a shekel according to the shekel of the sanctuary." In quotations, the shekel is 20 gerahs. End of quotation. Half a shekel as a contribution for the Lord. Everyone who is numbered from 20 years old and over shall give the contribution to the Lord. The rich shall not pay more, and the poor shall not pay less than half the shekel, when you give the contribution to the Lord to make atonement for yourselves. And you shall take the atonement money from the sons of Israel and give it for the service of the tent of meeting, that it may be a memorial for the sons of Israel before the Lord, to make atonement for yourselves. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, You shall also make a laver of bronze with its base of bronze for washing. And you shall put it between the tent of meeting and the altar, and you shall put water in it. And Aaron and his sons shall wash their hands and their feet from it. When they enter the tent of meeting, they shall wash with water, and that they may not die, or when they approach the altar to minister by offering up in smoke a fire sacrifice to the Lord. So they shall wash their hands and their feet, that they may not die, and it shall be a perpetual statute for them, for Aaron and his descendants throughout their generations. Moreover, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Take also for yourself the finest of spices, of flow and myrrh, 500 shekels, and of fragrant cinnamon half as much, 250, and of fragrant cane 250, and of cassia 500 according to the shekel of the sanctuary, and of olive oil a hin. And you shall make of these holy anointing oil, a perfume mixture, the work of a perfumer. It shall be a holy anointing oil. And with it you shall anoint the tent of meeting, and the ark of the testimony, and the table and all its utensils, and the lampstand and its utensils, and the altar of incense, and the altar of burnt offering and its utensils, and the laver and its stand. You shall also consecrate them, that they may be most holy. Whatever touches them shall be holy. And you shall anoint Aaron and his sons, and consecrate them, that they may minister as priests to me. And you shall speak to the sons of Israel, saying, This shall be a holy anointing oil to me throughout your generations. It shall not be poured on anyone's body, nor shall you make any like it in the same portions. It is holy, and it shall be holy to you. Whoever shall mix any like it, or whoever puts any of it on a layman, shall be cut off from his people. Then the Lord said to Moses, Take for yourself spices, stach, and onycha, and galbanum spices with pure frankincense. There shall be a equal part of each. And with it you shall make incense, a perfume, the work of a perfumer, salted, pure, and holy. And you shall bear some of it very fine, and put part of it before the testimony in the tent of meeting, where I shall meet with you. It shall be most holy to you. And the incense which you shall make, you shall not make in the same proportions for yourself. It shall be holy to you for the Lord. Whoever shall make any like it to use as perfume shall be cut off from his people.
All right, thank you, Brother John. For those just joining us, we just read Exodus chapter 30, starting from verse 11 there. And so, does anybody have any thoughts or comments or questions on what we read just so far here on the shekel of the sanctuary, making atonement for those men, or the anointing oil or the incense here? So, just a quick thought on the first part of what he read there, in regard to the men making atonement for themselves with a half a shekel. Um, this is kind of in contrast to what we read before about the free will the free will offering that everyone from their heart gave toward the building and materials of the Mishkan. And this one here is a mandatory uh, a mandatory price, if you will, or offering here, a payment, an atonement for each man 20 years old and upward, um, to make atonement for themselves. And this is a one-time thing here for this census. It's not like this is something commanded to be done forever throughout the generations. This was an initial atonement payment that they ransomed themselves with. Anybody have any thoughts, comments on that, or anything else here? Incense, oil. All right, let's go on to Exodus chapter 31. Would someone like to read Exodus 31 for us, please? Go right ahead, brother. Just let us know what version you got.
Okay. Yeah, I'm reading that ISR. The whole 31,
Yes,
brother?
thank you.
Chapter, the entire chapter 31, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And Yeshua spoke to Moshe, saying, "See, I have called by my name Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Yehuda, and I have filled him with the spirit of Elohim and wisdom and in understanding and in knowledge and in all work, to make designs for work in gold and in silver and in bronze and in cutting stones for setting and in carving wood, and to do work in all work. And I, look, have appointed with him Oholiab, son of Ahishmaach, of the tribe of Dan, and I have put wisdom in the hearts of everyone who is wise-hearted, and they shall make all that I have commanded you, the tent of appointment, and the ark of the witness, and the lid of atonement that is on it, and all the utensils of the tent, and the table and its utensils, and the clean gold lampstand with all its utensils, and the slaughter place of incense, and the slaughter place of its sending offering with all its utensils, and the basin and its stand, and the woven garments and the set apart garments for Aharon, and the priest's garments of his sons for serving as priests, and the anointing oil and the sweet incense for the set apart place, according to all that I have commanded you, they are to do. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, and you speak to the children of Israel, saying, my Sabbaths you are to guard by all means, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, to know that I, Yahuwah, am setting you apart. And you shall guard the Sabbath, for it is set apart to you. Everyone who profanes it shall certainly be put to death, for anyone who does work on it, that being shall be cut off from among his people. 6 days work is done, and on the seventh is a Sabbath of rest, set apart to Yahuwah. Everyone doing work on the Sabbath day shall certainly be put to death. And the children of Israel shall guard the Sabbath, to perform the Sabbath throughout the generations as an everlasting covenant. Between me and the children of Israel it is a sign forever. For in 6 days Yahuwah made the heavens and the earth, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed. And when he had ended speaking with him in Mount Sinai, he gave Moshe 2 tablets of the witness, tablets of stone, written with the finger of Elohim.
Thank you, brother. Okay, any thoughts or comments on this chapter here? Chapter 31.
So you can see like how serious it is to observe the Shabbat, because it's capital punishment if you don't. It's taken so lightly nowadays, but to Abba, it's really serious. It's a serious offense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We need to take it.
And I always experience like a feeling of death, like, because in 2008 I started observing Torah, but continued. I went to Messianic Jewish congregations, but combined with Sunday worshiping congregations. Like it took me a while to just stay in one, and I felt like the days that I didn't observe Shabbat, it's just like this feeling of death. Like I didn't feel connected with him, and the whole week I was exhausted. I that's one of the things that I realized, like, no, even though in Sunday church they're saying we don't have to observe Shabbat, but I saw it like by weekly. I saw the difference, like when I observed Shabbat and when I didn't, the difference in my connection with Abba and how my week went. So I testify that this is really true.
That's right. That's right. Let's see, brother Nathaniel, did you have any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I was going to say verse 17, between me and the children of Israel, it is a sign forever. You know, we know in Galatians, chapter 3, we have an adoption of sons, through Hamashiach, and we know that we all, Yisrael, as it means, all who overcome this world, or he who wrestles, on behalf of El, on behalf of God. Those are his children. Exodus 4:22 says Yisrael is my firstborn. Obviously, Jacob was not the firstborn, but Yahuwah counted him. But he said specifically Yisrael. His chosen, those that he calls out. And so you see here, it's between me and the children of Israel. It is a sign forever. That's the kingdom, right? That's what the kingdom is the kingdom of Israel, the government, the mountain of Yahuwah. And shouldn't we want to be the children of Israel? So is that not a sign forever? A lot of times people try to use out of context things to try to disassociate themselves with the fourth commandment. But here, time and time again, when we actually study for ourselves, we see plain as day, sign forever, and that's what sets us apart from the nations.
Yep. Absolutely. No other people group on the planet have a day off like this on the seventh day, like Yah has established for his people, right? It is a very special sign or marker for his set apart ones. Absolutely. Anybody else have any thoughts on this chapter? We just, for those just joining us, we just read chapter 31 of Exodus, Torah portion Tisa. So I would like to point out something that maybe interesting for some of you to hear, is that this guy Bezalel, in verse 2, he's actually, to me, he's one of the most interesting men that we can read about in the Torah that has the least amount of information about him. Okay, but it says that he's the son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Yehuda. Right? Hur is he's one of the men that was on the top of the mountain with Moshe, holding his arms up when they were getting weary, along with Aharon. So it was Aharon and Hur that were holding up Moshe's arms, right, while Yehoshua was defeating the Amalekites. Okay, so Bezalel is the grandson of Hur, and according to the historian Josephus, he says that Hur was also the husband of Miriam, who is, of course, Moshe's sister. So that's just an interesting fact, I guess, from the historian there. But what I find really interesting about Bezalel is that it says that Yah says, "I have filled him with the spirit of Elohim, in wisdom and in understanding, and in knowledge and in all kinds of workmanship, to devise skillful works, to work in gold and in silver and in bronze, and in cutting of stones for setting, and in carving of wood, to work in all kinds of workmanship." And of course, he gives him an assistant named Holiab and all. And that guy's from the tribe of Dan. Okay, But here's really what stands out to me, right? I see a picture of I see a foreshadow of Messiah in Bezalel. Uh, the way that he's anointed in overseeing the entire building and design of the Mishkan, right? And what's fascinating to me is that Bezalel, uh, in the tribe of Yehuda, he's actually a great. He's like an ancestor of King David, and by default, Yeshua's lineage. So, but beyond that, even we see this really interesting aspect that we know that this Mishkan and later the temple, that it was only supposed to be the Kohanim, of the Levites that had access to work with these things, and in the set apart place, they were the ones tasked with and authorized to perform the duties of the tabernacle and the temple. Okay, but it's really interesting to me that this man Bezalel is filled with the Holy Spirit, the Ruach Hakodesh, and that he is given charge and tasked with the complete, building and construction and setup of all these, not just the building of it, but the fabrics and the designs and the colors and the weaving and the gold and the silver and all the implements that are used in there. Uh, he's overseeing it all, and that's and this man is not a Levite, and he's not a Cohen, he's not a priest. He's of the tribe of Yehuda, and here Yah has filled this already talented and gifted man. He's filled him with a full measure of the Ruach Hakodesh in order to accomplish this great work. And I find it fascinating that here's a man filled with the Holy Spirit of the tribe of Yehuda that has his hands in the crafting and making and building of the temple, which was supposed to be Levites, the priests in the Levite tribe only. I just see a picture of Yeshua in that, that Yeshua has an authority or an access, above and beyond the human priesthood framework, and it's just fascinating. Go ahead, Brother Tom.
Yeah, piggybacking on what you're saying there, I find it really interesting that the succession of this is that he first gives this man the ability to build this thing that is a portrayal and a picture of Yeshua, and then following that, he tells everybody, you got to keep my Sabbaths. And part of keeping the Sabbaths is finding out more and more every week the intricate parts of who Yeshua is. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that part of that is did they have to go to the tabernacle as part of the Sabbath service, or is that wrong? Either way, I'm not sure, but I find it interesting that that those two things happened back to back. I mean, that's the whole point of the Sabbath, isn't it? To get closer and closer with Yeshua.
Amen. 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 So Andy mentions in Exodus 31:14, "You shall keep the Sabbath, therefore, for it is holy unto you. Every one that defileth it shall surely be put to death. For whosoever doeth any work therein, that soul shall be cut off from among his people." And he says also there are claims that metalwork came further in the timeline of man, but this clearly shows otherwise. Um, if you go back to Genesis chapter 4, Bereshit chapter 4, I believe it's verse 22, or back up to verse 21, it says in his verse 20 says, "And Adab bore Yabal, he was the father of those who dwell in tents with livestock." And 21 says, "And his brother's name was Ubal, he was the father of all those who play the lyre and flute." And 22 says, "As for Tila, she also bore Tubal Cain, a smith of all kinds of tools in bronze and iron, and the sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. And then it goes on to talk about Lamech and his two wives and all that. But that right there, Bereshit chapter 4, verse 22, Tubal-Cain is a smith of all kinds of tools in bronze and in iron. So that's predating, the account of the Exodus and in the wilderness there by far, by thousands of years there. So um, yeah, they say it was impossible for Noah to make the ark without metal, but yeah, they had I'm sure they had knowledge of that, at that time, according to this in Genesis here, because this is prior to Noah's time too. So yeah, it's a good side note, Andy. Thank you, brother. Okay, anybody else have any thoughts or comments on Betzalel or the Sabbath here? It's a capital offense to willfully break the Sabbath here. So, and it says it twice in this chapter. And it already gave us the example of the man gathering sticks, willfully disobeying, right after he had told them, what to do, and he's willfully out there gathering sticks on Shabbat. Any thoughts or comments before we go on to Exodus 32 here? All right, let's go on to Exodus chapter 32. Who would like to read chapter 32 for us, please? Okay, go ahead, Brother Tom. Did you want to read it?
Yeah, if nobody else is raising their hand, I'll read it.
Thank you, brother. Go ahead. New King James, you got?
Now, when the people saw that Moshe... Oh, sorry. It's the New King James Version, the Possibility Thinkers version, where the he's and hims are all capitalized when they're talking about Yahweh.
All right, yeah, you got 32.
Now, when the people saw that... Now, when the people saw that Moshe delayed coming down from the mountain, the people gathered together to Aharon and said to him, "Come, make us gods that shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him." And Aaron said to them, "Break off the golden earrings which are in the ears of your wives, your sons, and your daughters, and bring them to me." So all the people broke off the golden earrings which were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. And he received the gold from their hand, and he fashioned it with an engraving tool and made a molded calf. Then they said, "This is your God, O Israel, that brought you out of the land of Egypt." So when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it. And Aaron made a proclamation and said, "Tomorrow is a feast to Yahweh." Or maybe that's Lord. I'm not sure. In my version, all the letters are capitalized, so maybe he did say Yahweh there. Then they rose early on the next day, offered burnt offerings, and brought peace offerings, and the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. And Yahweh said to Moses, "Go, get down, for your people whom you brought out of the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves. They have turned aside quickly out of the way which I commanded them. They have made themselves a molded calf, and worshipped it, and sacrificed to it, and said, 'This is your God, O Israel, that brought you out of the land of Egypt.'" And Yahweh said to Moses, "I have seen this people, and indeed it is a stiff-necked people. Now therefore let me alone, that my wrath may burn hot against them, and I may consume them, and I will make of you a great nation." And Moses pleaded with Yahweh, his Elohim, and said, "Adonai, why does your wrath burn hot against your people, whom you have brought out of the land of Egypt, with great power and with a mighty hand? Why should the Egyptians speak and say, 'He brought them out to harm them, to kill them in the mountains, and to consume them from the face of the earth'? Turn your fierce wrath, and relent from this harm to your people. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, your servants, to whom you swore by your own self, and said to them, 'I will multiply your descendants as the stars of heaven, and all this land that I have spoken of I give to your descendants, and they shall inherit it forever. So Yahweh relented from the harm which he said he would do to his people. And Moshe turned and went down from the mountain, and the 2 tablets of the testimony were in his hand. The tablets were written on both sides. On the one side and on the other they were written. Now the tablets were the work of Elohim, and the writing was the writing of Elohim engraved on the tablets. And when Joshua heard the noise of the people as they shouted, he said to Moses, "There is a noise of war in the camp." But he said, "It is not the voice of those who shout in victory, nor is it the voice of those who cry out in defeat, but the voice of those who sing that I hear." So it was, as soon as he came near the camp, that he saw the calf and the dancing. So Moshe's anger became hot, and he cast the tablets out of his hand and broke them at the foot of the mountain. Then he took the calf which they had made, burned it in the fire, and ground it to powder. And he scattered it on the water, and he made the children of Israel drink it. And Moses said to Aaron, "What did this people do to you that you have brought so great a sin upon them?" So Aaron said, "Do not let the anger of my Lord become hot. You know the people, that they are set on evil. For they said to me, 'Make us gods that shall go before us.' As for this Moses, the man who brought us out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him. And I said to them, 'Whoever has any gold, let them break it off.' So they gave it to me, and I cast it into the fire, and this calf came out." Now when Moses saw that the people were unrestrained, for Aaron had not restrained them, to their shame among their enemies, and Moses stood in the entrance of the camp and said, "Whoever is on the Lord's side, let him come to me." And all the sons of Levi gathered themselves together to him. And he said to them, "Thus says Adonai, Elohim of Israel, let every man put his sword on his side, and go in and out from entrance to entrance throughout the camp, and let every man kill his brother, every man his companion, and every man his neighbor." So the sons of Levi did according to the word of Moshe. And about 3,000 men of the people fell that day. And Moshe said, "Consecrate yourselves today to Yahweh, that he may bestow on you a blessing this day, for every man has opposed his son and his brother." And it came to pass on the next day that Moshe said to the people, "You have sinned a great sin. So now I will go up to Adonai, to Yahweh. Perhaps I can make atonement for your sin." Then Moshe returned to Yahweh and said, "Oh, these people have sinned a great sin, and have made for themselves a god, of gold. Yet now, if you will forgive their sin, but if not, I pray blot me out of your book, which you have written." And Yahweh said to Moshe, "Whoever has sinned against me, I will blot out of my book. Now therefore go, lead the people to the place of which I have spoken to you. Behold, my angel shall go before you. Nevertheless, in the day when I visit for punishment, I will visit punishment upon them for their sin." So Yahweh plagued the people because of what they did with the calf which Aaron made.
Thank you, Brother Tom. Appreciate that, brother. Okay, there's a lot here, and
Well,
wow, what do you think, Tom? Any thoughts after reading that?
nothing really right off the bat. I did have a couple of thoughts while I was reading, but nothing I'm ready to share quite yet.
All right, that's okay. So yeah, and then in verse 5, Aharon saw and built an altar before it, and Aharon called out and said, "Tomorrow is a feast to Yahweh." Okay, so it's important we make a distinction here. We have plenty of case. We know that it's they were just given these instructions from Mount Sinai, from His voice, from the voice of God, before they were even inscribed on the tablets with His finger. They were given these 10 debarim, and there's no question that they knew ahead of time that they were not to make any graven images or idols, that they're not to go after other gods. So it's important to also make a distinction here, though, in this matter, that in verse 5, that Aharon was declaring a feast to Yah with this golden calf, not some false god, not some idol of the nations around them like Moloch or Baal, but he was declaring a feast to Yah. So it's important we make this distinction, because this is also something that Yah hates. that we are not to worship him the way that other nations worship their gods. We're not to make any graven image unto Yah, let alone any other god, but not to him either. So they had the intention that this was a physical representation or idol of Yah, and it's still an abomination to him. It's detestable to him. And this matter of having that calf, when he comes down, he has the calf ground to powder, put into the water coming down from the mountain, and he had the people drink it. And that reminds me specifically of Numbers chapter 5 in the law of jealousy, or the Torah of jealousy. When a woman goes astray from her husband, and she's made to drink the bitter water or whatever, and that brings a curse. And those words are written down, and ground to powder, and she's made to drink that curse. And it's very similar to that. What's happening here? He has those people that were worshiping that calf drink that, drink the cup of that, and then of course we see that the Levites, especially all of the Levites, rise up and come to Moshe on the side of Yah here, and then there's 3,000 people that are killed here because of this great wickedness. Okay, so Brother Jason, did you have something, brother? All right, brother Tobiah, go ahead, brother.
Yeah, man. Wow. Here they are. They're going to have a feast to our Father. So that's a set apart time, where we should really, really be guarding, minding our P's and Q's. We're supposed to appear before Him, clean, and washed and made clean, white as snow, at our best, inside and out. And here they are, doing the first thing He said, he said, I'm a jealous Elohim. Don't have any. But yeah, here we go. They're making images, and I don't know. It just amazed me how, like you said, he had them to drink the dust of it. He had men within the camp to rise up and shed the blood of the others, and he said, anyone with sin shall be blotted out. That's pretty strong words there, and we should really, man. Yeah, it's definitely the fear of Yah that we should carry. That's what I see. And yeah, Tom, like Chris also confirmed it. Verse 5, you was talking about there when you was curious about that. The last word there is Strong's 3068. It is Yah.
Right. Yeah. So if it had been Baal, then we might think, okay, they were doing it to a false god, but they were absolutely intending that to worship Yah with that idol, with that golden calf image they made. And another example of this is found in 1 Kings chapter 12, in the matter of Jeroboam ordaining a feast in the 8th month, on the 15th day of the 8th month, similar to the feast that was in Yehuda, and he offered upon an altar. And they sacrificed under the calves and that he had made, and he placed them in Bethel, the priests of the high places which he had made. And this is something that Jeroboam was doing unto Yah, but in his own way. He made up his own feast day. In the 8th month, there is no feast day in the 8th month. Okay, and this is why we need to be careful with Purim and some of these other things too. We need to be careful because I understand that some things you keep as just as a memorial day of an event that has happened, or somebody important in your life has passed away or whatever. But we need to be careful that we don't elevate that to the status of being a holy, set apart feast day. when he has not commanded us to do that. So 1 Kings chapter 12 is something you can make a note of and read later if you want, but that is where Jeroboam, he made up his own feast day on the 15th day of the 8th month and sacrificed unto calves onto high places that he erected. And that was unto Yah, not unto false gods or false deities, but unto Yah. And that is, and again, is no different from the golden calf before us here today. That is an abomination. And so it's important to make these distinctions here because we have plenty of cases in the scriptures where they're going after false gods and doctrines of demons and all that. But these are two cases where they're actually doing it unto Yah, and he's saying that's detestable to me. Don't do that. And another good passage to read that goes with this is Deuteronomy 12. That whole chapter is very relevant to this as well. Let's go to Brother Max. Go ahead, brother. Good morning. Shabbat Shalom.
Good morning. Sorry I'm late there, but actually Carolina's hand was up before mine was, so if you want to take her first.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, sister.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Well, one quick thing, something that it came to mind. What triggered them to start worshiping the golden calf? It was just because Moshe took too long in their own minds. They had kind of like a time frame for him to be up there, and when it was longer than they thought it would be, they started turning to another form of worship, like maybe fear. I don't know what in their hearts, but I felt Abba telling me this week when I read it that I need to watch out for that too. Like, because I ask him for something, I expect him to do things, but then he takes longer than I think he is. I'm thinking he's going to do something right away, and he takes longer to do something. Just like when Daniel asked in prayer, and then it took longer, and the angel said that why it took long for him to answer the prayer. So there's a process for things, but meanwhile, as we wait, be watchful so we don't turn to idols while we're waiting for Abba to answer a prayer or to do something that we know that he's going to do. So very careful. I gotta be very careful while I'm waiting, what I'm going to be doing while I'm waiting on the Lord. So I wouldn't turn to idols just like they did in the desert.
Amen. Amen. Okay, Brother Max, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on a little bit to what you were talking about in verse 5 and what Tobiah was mentioning. If you go down to verse 6, it says, this is chapter 32, verse 6. Early the next day, the people offered up burnt offerings and brought sacrifices of well-being. They sat down to eat and to drink, and then arose to dance. Again, we've covered this before, but the word burnt there, that for burnt offering, is olah, which means it's another interpretation of it is an elevation offering. It's the same kind of offering that Jethro offered when he and Moshe got together, and Moshe had explained to him all the things that Yah had done for him and for the people of Israel. And what it means basically is an elevation offering is a recognition that you are elevating your worship from one level to a higher level. So for the people to have offered an elevation or burnt offering was for them to proclaim that the God that they were now worshiping was more powerful or had elevated them higher than the God that they had previously been worshiping. So this was really an up and in your face to Yah by offering up such an offering as that. Just want to bring that up.
And again, this is happening after he has just, recently spoken the words of the covenant, the Devarim, the 10 Devarim to these people. So they were told specifically, to love him and to not make idols, not have any other god, and so this is like blatant, willful sin here. Okay, Brother Nathaniel, go ahead, brother.
Yeah, I was gonna. I just lost my place just now. Hang on, I gotta find it. It's verse 32. 32, 31. Where it talks about these people sinned a great sin. and then you see Moshe go on to say in verse 32, he says, "And now if you would forgive their sin, but if not, please blot me out of your book which you have written." You see him trying to atone essentially the sins of the children. The father's trying to take place, and you see Yahuwah correct him here. I find that interesting. He says, Yahuwah said to Moshe, "Whoever sinned against me, I blot him out of my book. And now go lead the people to the place which I have spoken to you. See, my messenger goes before you, in the day of my visitation I shall visit their sin upon them." I kind of see that last piece there in the day of my visitation. Whether he might be talking about maybe sometime there shortly, I do see kind of a foreshadowing of the day of Yahuwah, the day of judgment. And it kind of reminds me that of I'm sure people have heard this before, that sin is like a credit card. We don't necessarily have to make that payment today. We just kind of keep running that card up, and sometimes I found it interesting. Moses trying to pay for that, and we all are accountable. Even though that we can help each other, as the scripture says that we help each other with our crosses to bear, but each one bears his individual, cross. So everyone, essentially they're responsible for their own, but we do help each other out. And you see Moshe, trying to do as such.
Yeah, I definitely see, a foreshadowed Messiah here in the heart of Moshe, and standing in the gap, trying to be a mediator for the people here, between them and Yah, and it's like, to say, blot me out of your book if you're not going to, I mean, that's pretty extreme, right? That's a bold thing for him to say that and be willing to do that, in his heart. I just see a picture here of Moshe acting as a repairer of the breach, just like Yeshua in Isaiah 58, and it's just awesome. It's awesome heart here to see. One I mentioned Deuteronomy 12 when I was speaking before about this. I want to read a few verses from that. I'm not going to read the whole chapter for the sake of brevity and moving forward here, but Deuteronomy chapter 12, I'm going to read verses 1 through 4, and then I'm going to read verses 29 through 32, because they kind of are the two bookends to the whole point that he's trying to make here, and it goes right along with what we're talking about. I'm reading it from the New Living Translation on this one. It says, "These are the decrees and regulations you must be careful to obey when you live in the land that Yah, your Elohim of your ancestors, is giving you. You must obey them as long as you live. When you drive out the nations that live there, you must destroy all the places where they worship their gods, high on the mountains, up on the hills, and under every green tree. Break down their altars and smash their sacred pillars, burn their Asherah poles, and cut down their carved idols. Completely erase the names of their gods. Do not worship Yah, your Elohim, in the way these pagan peoples worship their gods." And then verse 29, "When Yah, your Elohim, goes ahead of you and destroys the nations, and you drive them out and live in their land, do not fall into the trap of following their customs and worshiping their gods. Do not inquire about their gods, saying, 'How do these nations worship their gods?' I want to follow their example. You must not worship Yah, your Elohim, the way the other nations worship their gods, for they perform for their gods every detestable act that Yah hates. They even burn their sons and daughters as sacrifices to their gods. So be careful to obey all the commands I give you. You must not add anything to them or subtract anything from them." do not worship. He says, do not worship me the way they worship their gods. And someone brought up in the chat, some of these holidays that we have in front of us. The Easters and the Christmas and Halloween, which is based on All Saints Day, and Dia de los Muertos, in the Latin countries, all these things are done. Originally, they were, when they started to try to Christianize these days, they were doing it with the intent of doing it unto the Lord, doing it unto Yah, making it about Messiah instead of what it used to be about. And here it says plainly, and we have examples in the Scripture, that we are not to do these things to Him the way they do it to their gods. There's no way you can take this passage any other way. There's no exception here. We don't get to take a day that was a day of child sacrifice and set that day apart and say that we're gonna make it about Messiah now. That's detestable to Yah, and it's detestable to Messiah. Anybody else before we go on to chapter 33?
Yeah, I was going to add to that, Chris.
Go ahead.
A lot I bring up 1 Kings 12, 32 and 33, which is what you had brought up. And it says that he did so. I forget where. I think verse 28. He says that in his heart, the reason why Jeroboam did that is because if he would have, because 3 times a year they have to appear before Yahuwah in where he causes his name to dwell, which was in Jerusalem. And so Jeroboam said in his heart that 3 times a year they have to go back. And so eventually, getting used to going back to Jerusalem, the 10-tribe kingdom is going to go back to the 2-tribe, and they're going to become, one nation again. And so to keep the nation divided, what he did was he set up a false worship system, on the 8th month of the 15th day, and devised, the gold, had the gold calves made, and then. In 1 Kings chapter 14, in the beginning, Yahuwah sends a messenger, and he calls Jeroboam as dung, and he's going to sweep him and his family as dung. He eliminates his entire line, and says that the entire line of Jeroboam is to be wiped out because of that. The gravity of that sin. That sin it's the same thing that you see at the end of the book of Esther in 3 places in Esther chapter 9 about Purim. It says that they made it for themselves. You see this theme continuing to go on, so people in what is one of the worst things of the beast that you have, Daniel chapter 7 verse 25, referring of the 4th beast, which is the 4th kingdom, which, of the 4 elements or the 4 beasts, the 4 kingdoms. We have, Babylon, Persia, Greece, and then the 4th kingdom's not listed, but we know that it's Rome through context. And what is one of Rome's characteristics? In Daniel 7:25, Rome's characteristics is that it intends to change the appointed times, which is another way of saying holy days or holidays, and it intends to change the law. That's one of the things of Rome's characteristics, is doing specifically that, and we are told not to be doing this, as Chris wrote or read, that we aren't to worship our father as the other nations worship their father. So whether it's occultic sun god worship or moon goddess worship or what have you, or all that, we're going to be careful not to be mixing that in. So I do find that as it's almost kind of a form of like genetically modifying, or adding to the system. I see it as a mixed worship. It's almost more dangerous than open Satan worship, because you think you're doing good when in fact you're doing something that's evil before the one, that very person you're trying to worship. So we are to be careful over that.
All right, let's check with Brother John. Go ahead, brother, and then we'll go to Sister Carolina.
Yeah, yeah. Did somebody say like a little bit ago something about the 8th month and the 15th day? Because I wasn't sure what
Yeah,
was being said about that.
yeah, that's in 1 Kings chapter 12. When the
Oh, okay, okay. I thought we were talking in Exodus. That's right. I
yeah
was like looking. I can't see that in here.
yeah I just kind of I was making a kind of a side note on that, kind of being relevant to,
Oh,
doing something under Yah that's not authorized, worshiping Him in another way other than what He's shown us. And so that's about
oh, okay.
Jeroboam, when the kingdoms were split, and Jeroboam made up. He manufactured his own feast day on the 15th day of the 8th month, and sacrificed unto calves that he erected on high places of his own outside of Jerusalem. And I mean, it's another example.
Oh, I only got part of that because I thought you were associating the Aaron having the saying he was going to declare a feast on that day or something like that. I said, wait, I can't find any here. We're here, and I got sidetracked on that. I'm sorry about that.
No problem, no problem. All right, Sister Carolina, go ahead.
One of the forms that the Greeks worshiped their gods was through sports, so that's something to be aware as well. Not only the holidays, the secular holidays, but other forms of worship. Uh, yeah, so something to be careful, because you can totally be worshiping idols without knowing, like our brother shared, not noticing that you think you're doing something that is harmless, but it's actually idol worship.
Yeah, it doesn't just have to be golden calf, does it, sister? Or statues or any, I mean, we are certainly capable of making, idols out of whatever is taking prominence in our lives, and separating us from Yah. And I'll tell you, even more so than, I mean, television can be an idol. Internet use can be an idol. I mean, all these things. If we elevate them to a status that they are more prominent than Yah, and the other things in our life that are supposed to be more important, like family and all that, then that's problematic, in a really bad way.
Yeah.
But even more so than those other things, one of the biggest idols that we can fall into worshiping is ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's where pride. That's where the low hanging fruit of self pride and narcissism and all these things, that it's all, that's all internalized. And that's why Yeshua reminds us what the two greatest commandments are: is to love Yah with all of our heart, soul, and might, and to love our neighbor as ourselves, so that we are equal with our neighbors and not elevating ourselves upward, and that we love Yah more than anything else. So if we love Yah with all of our heart, soul, and might, that means that we are loving Him more than ourselves, who we are supposed to be loving as ourselves. Shabbat Shalom, Brother Solomon. How you doing today? How's he doing, sister?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, how's he doing? I heard him making some noise. I was just saying Shabbat Shalom to him.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's him and Jojo. Sometimes they fight because over toys and stuff.
Oh, yeah. All right.
Yeah, he's doing well. Yeah, it's just like, yeah.
All right. Well, let's go on to chapter 33. Sister Carolina, you want to read 33 for us?
Yes, sir. 33. Okay. Adonai said to Moshe, "Leave you and the people you brought up from the land of Egypt and move on from here toward the land of which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I will give it to your descendants. I will send an angel ahead of you, and I will drive out the Canaanite, Amori, Hittite, Perizi, Hivi, and Yebusi." Jojo, shh. Chichi is reading the Bible, okay? You will go to a land flowing with milk and honey, but I myself will not go with you, because you are such a stiff-necked people that I might destroy you on the way. When the people heard this bad news, they went into mourning, and no one wore his ornaments. Adonai said to Moshe, tell the people of Israel, you are stiff-necked people. If I were to go up with you for even one moment, I would exterminate you. Now, keep your ornaments off, then I will decide what to do to you. So from Mount Horeb onward, the people of Israel stripped themselves of their ornaments. Moshe would take the tent and pitch it outside the camp, far away from the camp. He called it the tent of meeting. Everyone who wanted to consult Adonai would go out to the tent of meeting outside the camp. Whenever Moshe went out to the tent, all the people would get up and stand, each man at his tent door, and look at Moshe until he had gone into the tent. Whenever Moshe entered the tent, the column of cloud would descend and station itself at the entrance to the tent. And Adonai would speak with Moshe. When all the people saw the column of cloud stationed at the entrance to the tent, they would get up and prostrate themselves, each man at his tent door. Adonai would speak to Moshe face to face as a man speaks to his friend. Then he would return to the camp, but the young man who was his assistant, Yehoshua, the son of Nun, never left the inside of the tent. Moshe said to Adonai, look, you say to me, make these people move on, but you haven't let me know whom you will be sending with me. Nevertheless, you have said, I know you by name, and also you have found favor in my sight. Now please, if it is really the case that I have found favor in your sight, show me your ways so that I will understand you and continue finding favor in your sight. Moreover, keep on seeing this nation as your people. He answered, set your mind at rest. My presence will go with you after all. Moshe replied, if your presence doesn't go with us, don't make us go on from here. For how else is it to be known that I have found favor in your sight, I and your people, other than by your going with us? That is what distinguishes us, me and your people, from all the other peoples on earth. Adonai said to Moshe, I will also do what you have asked me to do, because you have found favor in my sight, and I know you by name. But Moshe said, I beg you to show me your glory. He replied, I will cause all my goodness to pass before you, and in your presence I will pronounce the name of Adonai. Moreover, I show favor to whomever I will, and display mercy to whomever I will. But my face, he continued, you cannot see, because a human being cannot look at me and remain alive. Here, he said, is a place near me. Stand on the rock. When my glory passes by, I will put you inside a crevice in the rock and cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will remove my hand, and you will see my back, but my face is not to be seen.
Thank you, sister. What version was that you were reading from?
Complete Jewish Bible.
Okay, very good. All right, I've got a plane flying overhead, so apologize for that in the background. Does anybody have any thoughts, comments, questions on this chapter here? We see that it is possible to see the Father, but without seeing His face. And I believe this is what Yeshua was talking about when he says, "No one has seen the Father, but if you've seen me, you've seen the Father." In John chapter 14, 15, those are good chapters to read here on your own time. But we have Yah placing him in the cleft of a rock and covering him until he has passed by. So he's only seeing him from behind him. Okay, but in this same chapter, it says he's talking with him face to face, and so when I believe what he means by that in verse 11, Yah spoke to Moshe face to face, as a man speaks to his friend. I think what it's trying to say there is he's speaking to him, one to one, in an audible conversation, just like if I was sitting here talking with somebody next to me. And again, it doesn't mean that Moshe saw his face, but he did see the presence of the Most High, and of course from behind, and not seeing his face. So does anybody have any thoughts comments, questions? Go ahead, Brother Nathaniel.
Yeah, just a question, really. I was wondering what you, if you had done any research, because I have not, on what those ornaments are that they had on. You know, verse 4, 5 and 6 talk about them having ornaments on. Have you done any study about what they possibly could be talking about there?
No, mine says, well, it says in World English Bible jewelry, and in the scriptures, ornaments. So, um, yeah, I mean, they must have adorned themselves with something there. Let's see what the Hebrew says there.
Maybe it's just jewelry then? They're just maybe just putting things on that are, I don't know, pleasant and pleasing to look at, and maybe Yahuwah didn't want to look at them in a pleasant or pleasing way, and so he felt that them maybe wearing something like that after what they just did, especially with what they used to make the thing with, which was jewelry, maybe that was kind of disrespectful in his eyes, so no one wanted to put that on because it reminded them of the calf that they made with the jewelry that I don't know. That's the only thing that I can kind of maybe see that it's talking about.
Yeah, it says in it's the Strong's number H5716 Adi, which is an ayin dalet yud, and it's most commonly translated as ornaments. That's based on the Browns and Jurgens definition there. The Strong says ornaments or trappings, as of trappings of horses, and there's 14 occurrences of this in the King James text in English. It says mostly ornaments. Ornaments. It looks like ornaments, maybe even ornaments that have to do with something in the mouth. So I don't know if they have like a lip ring or a tongue ring or something like that, but it's in Psalm 32 verse 9 and Psalm 103:5. It's having to do with something in their mouth. And most of the others are ornaments. So I would say some kind of jewelry or ornaments that they have adorned themselves with, quite possibly lip rings or tongue rings of some kind even. And he's just, I mean, he's really upset with these people, and he's he's like, hey, strip that stuff off of you, and you're not in any place to be adorning yourself with anything right now. And I don't know if anybody else. Go ahead, Brother Tobiah.
Okay, so the heavens is his throne and the earth is his footstool. And when we go before him, we bow ourselves, we make ourselves low. We don't raise ourselves up. I think it was Brother Max that was sharing with us several weeks back about how, we don't raise our Father up at all. We have no power to raise our Father up. We make him high before us by lowering ourselves before him. And I see this removal of the ornaments is similar to like sitting in sackcloth and ashes. It's not adorning ourselves or esteeming ourselves or making ourselves glamorous in any light in any way. We are all but filthy rags. And so to go before him all glamored up like we're something special is what I see the reasoning for the removal of the adornments here in this particular instance, and I see it and there could be more to it, or I could be wrong, but that's what I see. In verse 8, 9, and 10, it says, "It came to be when Moshe went out to the tent that all the people rose and each man stood at his tent door." Now, the tent door is significant, as Messiah says, "I am the door." And they watched Moshe until he entered the tent. And it came to be when Moshe entered the tent that the column of the cloud descended and stood at the door of the tent. There we go. This is where Moshe met with the column of the cloud, at the tent door. He spoke with Moshe. And all the people saw the column of the cloud standing at the tent door. And all the people rose and prostrate themselves or bowed themselves or put their faces to the ground, each one at the door of his tent. The door of the tent is significant. It's the place where Sarah heard that she was going to have a son and laughed within herself. She was at the tent door. It's the place that Abraham was when he met with the three messengers who spoke with him and had delivered him a message. It's the place the high priest, it says, go and take your offering to the high priest at the tent door, and our high priest being Messiah at the tent door, one who intercedes on behalf of his people. It has to do with speaking with our Father. It has to do with going before him in prayer, the tent door. And so that's what I see. And when we go before him, we make ourselves low. We bow ourselves to the earth, which is his footstool. We show him that we are but nothing before him. That's what I see here.
Very good, brother. Very good. All right. Any other thoughts on this before we go on to chapter 34? All right. I got jets flying overhead, so I apologize. Let's see here. Let's go to Exodus chapter 34. Who would like to read that for us today that hasn't read yet?
I'll go ahead and read, Chris.
All right. Thank you, brother.
I'm reading from the JPS version, 1985. And Yehova spoke to Moshe, carve 2 tablets of stone like the first, and I will inscribe upon the tablets the words that were on the first tablets, which you shattered. Be ready by morning, and in the morning come up to Mount Sinai and present yourself there to me on the top of the mountain. No one else shall come up with you, and no one else shall be seen anywhere on the mountain, neither shall the flocks and the herds graze at the foot of the mountain. So Moshe carved 2 tablets of stone like the first, and early in the morning he went up on to Mount Sinai as Jehovah had commanded him, taking the 2 stone tablets with him. Jehovah came down in a cloud. He stood with him there and proclaimed the name of Jehovah. Jehovah passed before him and proclaimed, Jehovah, Jehovah, Elohim, compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in kindness and faithfulness, extending kindness to the 1000th generation, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin. Yet he does not remit all punishment, but visits the iniquity of the parents upon the children, and the children's children upon the 3rd and 4th generations. Moshe hastened to bow low to the ground in homage, and said, if I have gained your favor, Jehovah, pray, let Jehovah go in our midst, even though this is a stiff-necked people. Pardon our iniquity and our sin, and take us for your own. He said, I hereby make a covenant before all your people. I will work such wonders as have not been wrought upon all the earth or in all the nations, and all the people who are with you shall see how awesome Jehovah's deeds are, which I will perform for you. Mark well what I command you this day. I will drive out before you the Amorites and the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and Jebusites. The Jebusites. It would be worth making a covenant with the inhabitants of the land which you are advancing, lest they be a snare in your midst. No, you must tear down their altars, smash their pillars, and cut down their sacred posts. For you must not worship any other God, because Jehovah, whose name is impassioned, is an impassioned Elohim. You must not make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, for they will lust after their gods and sacrifice to their gods and invite you, and you will eat of their sacrifices. And when you take wives from among their daughters for your sons, their daughters will lust after their gods and will cause your sons to lust after their gods. You shall not make molten gods for yourselves. You shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, eating unleavened bread for 7 days, as I have commanded you, at the set time of the month of Aviv. For in the month of Aviv you went forth from Egypt. Every first issue of the womb is mine. From all your livestock that drop a male, a firstling, whether it cattle or sheep, but the firstling of an ass you shall redeem with a sheep. If you do not redeem it, you must break its neck. and you must redeem every firstborn from among your sons. None shall appear before me empty-handed. 6 days you shall work, but on the seventh day you shall cease from your labor. You shall cease from labor even at the plowing time and harvest time. You shall observe the Feast of Weeks, of the first fruit of the wheat harvest, and the Feast of Ingathering at the turn of the year. 3 times a year all your males shall appear before the sovereign Lord, the Elohim of Israel. I will drive out the nations from your path and enlarge your territory. No one will covet your land when you go to appear before Jehovah your Elohim 3 times a year. You shall not offer the blood of my sacrifice with anything leavened, and the sacrifice of the feast of Passover shall not be left lying until morning. The choice first fruits of your soil you shall bring to the house of Jehovah your Elohim, and you shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. And Jehovah said to Moshe, write down these commandments, for in accordance with these commandments I make a covenant with you and Israel. He was there with Jehovah 40 days and 40 nights. He ate no bread and drank no water. And he wrote down the tablets in terms of the covenant, the 10 commandments. So Moshe came down from Mount Sinai, and as Moshe came down from the mountain bearing the 2 tablets of the pact, Moshe was not aware that his skin of his face was radiant, since he had spoken with him. Aharon and all the Israelites saw that the skin of Moshe's face was radiant, and they shrank from coming near him. But Moshe called to them, and Aharon and all the chieftains in the assembly to return to him, and Moshe spoke to them. Afterward, all the Israelites came near, and he instructed them concerning all that Jehovah had imparted unto him on Mount Sinai. And when Moshe had finished speaking with them, he put a veil over his face. Whenever Moshe went before the Jehovah to speak with him, he would leave the veil off until he came out. And when he came out and told the Israelites what he had been commanded, the Israelites would see how radiant the skin of Moshe's face was. Moshe would then put the veil back over his face until he went in to speak again with him.
All right, thank you, brother. Okay. Anybody have any thoughts, comments, or questions on this one here? Oh, Sister Lisa, go ahead.
I just had a question. On verse 25, where it says, do not slay the blood of my slaughter with leaven, and do not let the slaughtering of the festival of Pesach remain until morning. So does that mean that whatever we have, when we have the Passover meal, what if there is food left over? Should we be tossing that out if we can't finish it?
Yep, that's a good question. And in Exodus 12, it talks about how you if there is any left of it, that you shall burn it with fire. It doesn't specifically say that about the unleavened bread or bitter herbs or other things you may have, but it does specifically say that about the Pesach lamb or goat, whichever one that you've slaughtered and you're eating. If you don't finish it all, you're supposed to burn the rest of it, the remains of it, with fire. It is not to be given to the dogs or discarded in the trash. So that's.
So if you had a fireplace, because I do have a fireplace, would you throw it in the fireplace?
Well, that would be probably a good place, as long as you could kind of burn it in its entirety. You might not want. I don't know if you have a fireplace in your home, you're going to want to make sure it's kind of burning nice and hot when you go to do that, because you might have some of it that wouldn't burn all the way if it wasn't a hot fire, and then you might end up with some unpleasant smell in your house or whatever. So what we've done in the past was we just took whatever was left that we don't always have stuff remaining, but when we do, we would take it and burn it. And even the bones we would burn, but we would do it outside. I've not done that inside before. So I guess you have to do the best you can with what you have. And but a fireplace could work. You just got to make sure it's hot enough. You got a good bit of coals, or glowing hot coals in there, and some extra wood or whatever, and just make sure you kind of burn it all the way, so you don't have a mess in there.
Well, I'm glad we just read this. I don't know why I didn't notice it before, but I mean, we've had some left over and just put it in the fridge. So I'm glad to have captured that today. Thank you.
Well, yeah, it's good, and so it's this is why it talks about in Exodus 12. You know, if you have somebody that's like a neighbor or somebody that doesn't have enough people in their household to merit, you know, using a whole lamb for them, then you share yours with them, so that, you know, because the idea is that everybody gets a portion, and that it's used up. You know, it's eaten, and it's enjoyed and eaten, and that there's not any leftovers that are held for later. And we kind of see this, you know, it's kind of similar to how with the manna, right? You know, they were told not to try to store up extra for themselves, you know, because it would not be good the next day. You know, everyone was going to have their portion. Each day, Yah would provide enough manna for everyone, and they didn't need to try to gather extra and then hold it overnight, you know, because it was going to spoil. And and there's something to that about trusting Yah for a portion, and you know, and not being wasteful by having something that would be spoiling afterward and whatever. So, um, Brother Tobiah, you want to share on that, or something else here?
Yeah, it has to do with what our sister was asking about. More understanding about why our Father asked that, and the details about that are reiterated in Leviticus, particularly verses 11 through 21. And because the Passover is a type of peace offering. We'll see that right here in Leviticus 7:11. This is the Torah of the slaughtering of the peace offerings, which is brought to Yah. If he brings it for thanksgiving, then he shall bring it with the slaughtering of thanksgiving, unleavened cakes mixed with oil, and unleavened thin cakes anointed with oil, or cakes of finely blended flour mixed with oil. Besides the cakes, he brings as his offering leavened bread, together with the slaughtering of the thanksgiving of his peace offering. From it, he shall bring one cake from each offering as a contribution to Yah, to the priest who sprinkles the blood of the peace offering. It is his. As for the flesh of the slaughtering of the peace offering for thanksgiving, it is eaten the same day it is offered. He does not leave any of it until morning. And if the offering he brings is a vowed or a voluntary offering, it is eaten the same day that he brings the slaughtering. What is left is eaten the next day. But what is left of the flesh of the slaughtering on the third day, it is burned with fire. However, if any of the flesh of the peace offering is eaten at all on the third day, it is not accepted. It is not reckoned to him who brings it. It is unclean to him. And the being who eats of it bears his crookedness. And the flesh that which touches it is unclean. It is not eaten. It is burned with fire. And it is for the clean flesh, all who are clean eat of it. But the being who eats the flesh of the peace offering that belongs to Yah, while he is unclean, that being shall be cut off from his people. Whenever a being who touches that which is unclean of the uncleanness of man, or the uncleanness of beasts, or the uncleanness of a swarming creature, shall eat the flesh of the peace offering that belongs to Yah, that being shall be cut off from his people. So the Passover was all that were clean were supposed to eat of it. Those who were circumcised were supposed to eat of it. All your males to appear before me 3 times a year to partake of this tradition, this requirement, this remembrance, this. But we're supposed to guard to be in a clean state. Only those who are clean eat of this. This is a set apart offering. And so significance is of burning it is that what was burnt was considered to be our Father's portion. So we're not to be sharing that Passover. You don't just eat the Passover with anybody and everybody, is what we see the scriptures bear witness of. And it's special. It's set apart. Only those who are clean eat of it. It's considered the highest of the peace offerings, the Thanksgiving peace offering. And for whatever reason, our Father set a limit on don't leave any of it till morning. It's unclean after that. It's unclean. The other peace offerings, vowed, voluntaries, and others are considered unclean after the second day, on the third day. But the Passover, the Thanksgiving offering, is unclean right away, that when the sun rises, and no longer should anybody eat of it. So something to consider. Leviticus chapter 7's got the details of all that.
Yeah, that's specifically Leviticus 7 verse 18 that talks about how that is not eaten at all on the third day. It is not accepted. It is not reckoned to him who brings it. Um, so I would say I like the connections you made there, Brother Tobiah. And the only thing I would probably say, maybe slightly differently, is that I don't know that I would reckon the Pesach as a peace offering, but as it is similar to the peace offering protocol. But again, like you pointed out, there's a difference in the fact that the Pesach is not eaten after that night. It's not to remain until morning. Whereas the peace offerings listed in Leviticus 7 are, those are Thanksgiving or peace offerings, and those are able to be eaten up until the third day. So there's some slight differences there, as well as Exodus 12. Um, in Exodus 12, verse, let's see, verse 6 here? It says, and you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same new moon. Then all the assembly of the congregation of Israel shall slay it between the evenings. So the Pesach is like a communal slaughtering. Everyone is involved in that process, and it's, to me, what I glean from the word is that the Pesach is clear. Obviously, it's one of his Moedim as well, so it's kind of set apart from the typical peace offerings and Thanksgiving offerings. But I do appreciate the connections you made there, and there is a lot of similarities because it's offered with unleavened bread and everything too. So very very good
Right
connection.
on. Yeah. Leviticus 7:15 is the only place I can find that gives the same instructions as the Passover, where it says don't leave any of it until morning or whatever. It's in regards to the Thanksgiving peace offering.
All right, Lisa, was that helpful?
Yes, thank you guys so much.
Oh yeah, I see that too. As for the flesh of the slaughtering of his peace offerings for Thanksgiving, it is eaten the same day it is offered. He does not leave any of it until morning. So it does make a
Yeah,
distinction.
the Thanksgiving, like there's different types of peace offerings. So the Thanksgiving seems to be the most highly esteemed of the peace offerings, the Thanksgiving offering, as they say. And I agree with Brother Chris too, whereas I don't think it's talking about all of the food in general. As far as I can see, it's just talking about the flesh or the
Flesh part, yeah.
animal carcass or the slaughtered animal
That's
that we're
right.
eating of. Yeah.
All right. Anybody else have any thoughts on Exodus chapter 34 here? Some translations say that Moshe had horns on his head or on his face instead of shining with light or whatever, and I don't see how that really makes sense contextually compared with his skin shining or having a sheen to it. Uh, Talks about him wearing the veil there. Also, Moshe being.
Just to say to that,
Oh, go ahead, brother. Yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say also to say that that whole horn concept comes from the Roman Catholic Church and the depictions of Moshe because he was Jewish, and they often depicted Jews at that time as having horns and big hooked noses. That doesn't come from Scripture anywhere. That's
Yeah,
strictly a
isn't there isn't
Catholic.
there a isn't there a statue of Moshe too that has horns on it? Some kind of famous statue of Moshe with horns.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, there is.
I don't know if that was like Michelangelo or somebody that did that. I don't know sculpture history too well, but okay, go ahead, brother John.
Somebody demented.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kronos is the horned god. You get like crown. Well, crown actually is from Stephanos, which is Greek, but Kronos is a crown and actually comes from horns. So one could say that you know Moses had a halo about him, a glow about him, a halo, and the word halo comes from helios or also crown. So if you play with the words a bit, you can get horns from an aura around a person. So
Yeah,
using the word chronos.
yeah, I could see that. I could see that. Being a some kind of a countenance of coming off of the top of his head or something. That could have looked like that. Yeah, I get that. All right, Brother Tobiah, do you want to share something on
No, I think I just left my hand up. Sorry about that.
that? No problem. Okay, well, look, we'll stop here for a 10-minute break. We just finished the Torah portion part of it. We're gonna take 10 minutes here. We'll reconvene in 10 minutes from now and start on the Haftarah and the New Testament passages. So if you need to use the restroom or get a drink or whatever, feel free to do that, and we'll pick back up here in about 10 minutes. Okay. All right. Thanks. All right. So our Haftarah today from the prophets is in 1 Kings chapter 18. 1 Kings chapter 18, all verses 1 through 39. Okay, and this is the account of Eliyahu and the false prophets of Baal. Okay, so they're about to have a showdown here, and so would someone like to read this one for us, please? 1 Kings chapter 18, verses 1 through 39. We're not reading the entire chapter, just to verse 39. Somebody who hasn't read yet want to read this one for us? Okay, I'll go ahead and do this one then. All right, so I'm reading from the Scriptures, 2009 edition, ISR. And after many days it came to be that the word of Yah came to Eliyahu in the 3rd year, saying, Go present yourself to Ahab, and I give rain on the earth. Thereupon Eliyahu went to present himself to Ahab, and the scarcity of food in Shomron was severe. And Ahab had called Obadiah, who was over his house. Now Obadiah feared Yah exceedingly. And it came to be, while Isabel cut down the prophets of Yah, that Obadiah had taken 100 prophets and hidden them 50 to a cave, and had fed them with bread and water. And Ahab had said to Obadiah, Go into the land to all the springs of water and to all the wadis. It could be that we find grass to keep the horses and mules alive, and not have any livestock cut off. And they divided the land between them to pass over it. Ahab went one way by himself, and Obadiah went another way by himself. And as Obadiah was on his way, then see, Eliyahu met him, and he recognized him and fell on his face and said, Is that you, my master Eliyahu? And he answered him, It is I. Go, say to your master, Eliyahu is here. And he said, What have I sinned that you are giving your servant into the hand of Ahab to kill me? As Yah your Elohim lives, there is no nation or reign where my master has not sent to look for you. And when they said he is not here, he made the reign or nation swear that they could not find you. And now you say, Go say to your master, Eliyahu is here. And it shall be, as soon as I am gone from you, that the Ruach of Yah takes you away to a place I do not know, and I shall come to report to Ahab, and when he does not find you, he shall kill me. But I, your servant, have feared Yah from my youth. Was it not reported to my master what I did when Isabel killed the prophets of Yah, how I hid 100 men of the prophets of Yah, 50 to a cave, and fed them with bread and water? And now you say, Go say to your master, Eliyahu is here. Then he shall kill me. And Eliyahu said, As Yah of hosts lives, before whom I stand, I shall indeed show myself to him today. Obadiah then went to meet Ahab, and informed him, and Ahab went to meet Eliyahu. And it came to be, when Ahab saw Eliyahu, that Ahab said to him, Is that you, O disturber of Israel? And he answered, I have not disturbed Israel, but you and your father's house, in that you have forsaken the commands of Yah, and you have followed the Baals. And now send and gather all Israel to me on Mount Carmel, the 450 prophets of Baal, and the 400 prophets of Asherah, who eat at Isabel's table. Ahab then sent for all the children of Israel, and gathered the prophets on Mount Carmel. And Eliyahu came to all the people and said, how long would you keep hopping between two opinions? If Yah is Elohim, follow him, and if Baal, follow him. But the people answered him not a word. And Eliyahu said to the people, I alone am left, a prophet of Yah, but the prophets of Baal are 450 men. Now let them give us 2 bulls, and let them choose 1 bull for themselves, and cut it in pieces, and lay it on the wood, but set no fire. And I prepare the other bull, and shall lay it on the wood, but set no fire. And you shall call on the name of your mighty one, and I call on the name of Yah. And the Elohim who answers by fire, he is Elohim. So all the people answered and said, the word is good. And Eliyahu said to the prophets of Baal, choose 1 bull for yourselves, and prepare it first, for you are many, and call on the name of your mighty one, but set no fire. So they took the bull which was given them, and prepared it, and called on the name of Baal from morning even until noon, saying, O Baal, answer us. But there was no voice, and no one answered. And they leaped about the slaughter place which they had made, and it came to be at noon that Eliyahu taunted them and said, cry aloud, for he is a mighty one. He is meditating, or he is busy, or he is on a journey. Or could it be that he is asleep and has to be awakened? And they cried aloud, and cut themselves according to their ruling, with knives and spears, until the blood gushed out on them. And it came to be when midday was past, that they prophesied until the time of bringing the evening offering. But there was no voice, and no one answered, and no one paying attention. Then Eliyahu said to all the people, come closer to me. And all the people came closer to him, and he repaired the slaughter place of Yah that was broken down. And Eliyahu took 12 stones, according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Yaakov, to whom the word of Yah had come, saying, Yisrael is your name. And with the stones he built a slaughter place in the name of Yah, and he made a trench around the slaughter place, large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. And he arranged the wood, and cut the bull in pieces, and laid it on the wood, and said, fill 4 jars with water, and pour it on the ascending offering and on the wood. Then he said, do it a second time. And they did it a second time. And he said, do it a third time. And they did it a third time. And the water flowed around the slaughter place, and he filled the trench with water too. And it came to be at the time of bringing the evening offering that Eliyahu the prophet came near and said, Yah, Elohim of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yisrael, let it be known today, you are Elohim in Yisrael. And I, your servant, have done all these matters by your word. Answer me, O Yah, answer me, and let this people know that you are Yah Elohim, and you shall turn their hearts back to you again. Then the fire of Yah fell and consumed the ascending offering, and the wood, and the stones, and the dust, and it licked up the water that was in the trench. And all the people saw, and fell on their faces, and said, Yah, he is the Elohim. Yah, he is the Elohim. All right, powerful account here. Anybody have any thoughts or comments on this passage here from 1 Kings 18? Go ahead, Brother
Reading
John.
that's a good point. People.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying after reading that, it's a good point. Be blowing a shofar.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of modern days now when you go to you talk to people, particularly if you're witnessing or whatever, and let's say you talk to J witnesses or Catholics or Baptist or any of these other denominations or whatever. They say, but that's okay. We all believe in the same God, right? and in actuality, they really are not. They think they are, right? And all we need to do is have Elijah, right, come and so, a modern day one, and do that, and goodness, everybody will see in that one day when he comes back in the clouds. Everybody will know, and every knee will bow. But some people, they just say, "Oh, it's we all believe in the same God," and right there, that's what they were saying basically back then. You know, and times do not change. The 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 uh, the Torah and the scriptures, right, reflect way back then that the stuff that's still happening today. We just live a little bit differently. That's all, but it's all the same. That's it.
Yeah, that's good. Anybody else have any comments on this chapter? We just read 1 Kings chapter 18, verses 1 through 39. All right, well, let's go on to the New Testament here, the Brit Hadasha. Okay, so we have a passage from Matthew chapter 9, starting verse 35, and that goes to 11, verse 1. And then we have a passage in Acts chapter 7, verses 35 to chapter 8, verse 1. That's where Stephen's given a recount of Moshe and what happened there. And then 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 1 through 18. Okay, so Brother Nathaniel, go ahead. Did you have something on the Haftarah there, or do you want to read? All right. Anybody want to read the passage from Matthew chapter 9, verses 35 through 11:1?
I can read 9:35 in chapter 10.
Brother, I'm sorry. I was talking. I thought my phone was unmuted. I apologize for making you wait there so long for me.
No, that's okay. Yeah. Well, okay. So we'll hold up on the reading for a minute. Did you have something to share on the Haftarah?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought the thing was unmuted. Yeah, I was just going to mention. It's the same theme that we had saw before. Was the mixed worship. As Ahab, was tribe of Judah, and his wife Phoenician princess. You see that same mixed worship. The abominable things. Things that are profane and things that are set apart that are put together. And so it's just kind of adding to the character of what Yeshua wants and how he wants us to be. But I can read the next portion after the sister here reads this part too.
All right. Thanks. So, okay, sister. Let me check with Brother John real quick. Brother John, did you have something else?
No, I'm sorry. My hand was still up. I apologize for that. I do that sometimes. I'm sorry.
Okay. And then Brother Tom, did you have something to share on the Haftarah?
No, but I do have something to share before we read the Brit Hadasha, just out of curiosity, wondering if anybody else has had or is having the same experience. I used to feel like I had a really good grasp and a really good understanding of the letters and stuff in the Brit Hadasha. And recently I did one of these through the Bible in 90 days things. And I noticed when going through it all back to back like that I was, and this I think comes a lot from what you've one of the arguments that you have, Chris, against the mercy gospel, because in Romans he tells us that he's writing to people who already have a good solid foundation in Torah. And I found that when reading Torah and when reading the writings, I was getting a very deep understanding of what was being written. And then when it came time to read the Brit Hadasha, it's like, I mean, I can hear what's being said and I can understand some of it, but I don't think I'm quite at the point yet where I can get the same depth of understanding from the words in the Brit Hadasha as I currently am getting from the writings of the prophets and the writings from the Torah. I'm just curious if anybody else is feeling that same way. It just started for me about 6 months ago, and I noticed that.
Anybody want to speak to that there before we go forward? So this is just a thought, may be helpful to you, and I'm not necessarily promoting this version of scriptures over any other, but if you have the My Sword app on your phone or your computer or whatever, you can download the ISR version called the Scriptures 2009 edition, and in that, in the Brit Hadashah, there they have pretty much every reference to Torah or the Psalms or the Prophets is in bold. It's in bold letters, and it has the reference pointing back to where that is in the Tanakh. So I find that to be really convenient when reading that. It's a quick, easy way to look back at those, and um, I believe that's the case with the printed version of that too. It has that like a footnote about those verses where they're quoting something from the Tanakh, from the Torah, prophets, or writings. Brother Daniel, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I completely agree. Unless we have read the scripture from beginning to end, we can't really comprehend what the latter part is saying.
Romans 7:1, Shaul says, I speak to those who know the Torah. I speak to those that know the Torah. So it should definitely be something that's understood when reading his letters and some of the other epistles. Okay, so let's go on and move on to the Brit Hadashah reading then in Matthew. So I think Sister Caroline was going to read that, and then Brother Nathaniel can read the next passage, and then somebody else can read the third. So, Sister, you want to go ahead? You got the complete Jewish version of the Bible, right?
Is that okay using this version?
Yeah, just for reference, just whenever we go to read, we'll just kind of say what version we have, so others can reference it later if we need to.
Okay.
All right, so you want to read
Okay.
Matthew chapter 9, verse 35 to 11, verse 1? Or do you want?
Okay.
If it's a lot of reading, we could break it up too. I think Sister Deborah says she would read some of it too. If you want to, maybe you want to go to chapter 10, verse 15, and then she can pick up from there and go to 11:1.
Okay. Yeshua went about all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every kind of disease and weakness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were wearied and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his Talmidim, "The harvest is rich, but the workers are few. Pray that the Lord of the harvest will send out workers to gather in his harvest." Yeshua called his 12 Talmidim and gave him authority to drive out unclean spirits and to heal every kind of disease and weaknesses. These are the names of the 12 emissaries. First, Shimon, called Kepha, and Andrew his brother, Yaakov ben Zabdi, and Yochanan his brother, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matityahu the tax collector, Yaakov bar Halphai and Tadai, Shimon the zealot, and Yehuda from Kriot, who betrayed him. These 12, Yeshua went out with the following instructions. Don't go into the territory of the Goim, and don't enter any town in Shimron, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. As you go, proclaim, the kingdom of heaven is near. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those afflicted with zarat, expel the demons. You have received without paying, so give without asking payment. Don't take money in your belts, no gold, no silver, no copper. And for the trip, don't take a pack, an extra shirt, shoes, or a walking stick. A worker should be given what he needs. When you come to a town or village, look for someone trustworthy and stay with him until you leave. When you enter someone's household, say, Shalom Aleichem. If the home deserves it, let your shalom rest on it. If not, let your shalom return to you. But if the people of a house or town will not welcome or listen to you, leave it and shake its dust from your feet. Yes, I tell you, it will be more tolerable on the day of judgment for the people of Sidon and Amorah than for that town.
You want me to read now? Hello?
Yeah, go ahead,
Yes,
sister.
go ahead.
If you want to pick up,
Sorry,
from there and go to 11 verse 1.
Well, that's a long way. Okay, maybe somebody else will help me. Where are we now? And whoever will not receive you nor hear your words when you depart from the house or the city, shake off the dust from your feet. I'm talking from the New King James Version, Nelson translation. Assuredly, I say to you, it will be more tolerable for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than for that city. Behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. Therefore, be wise as serpents and harmless as doves, and be aware of men, for they will deliver you up to the councils and scourge you in the synagogues. You will be brought before governors and kings for my sake, as a testimony to them and to the Gentiles. But when they deliver you up, do not worry about how or what you should speak, for it will be given to you in that hour what you should speak. For it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of your Father who speaks in you. Now brother will deliver up brother to death, and a father his child, and a child will rise up against his parents and cause them to be put to death. And you will be hated by all for my name's sake, but he who endures to the end will be saved. When they persecute you in this city, flee to another. For assuredly I say to you, you will not have gone through the cities of Israel before the Son of Man comes. A disciple is not above his teacher, nor a servant above his master. It is enough for a disciple that he be like his teacher, and a servant like his master. If they have called the master of the house Beelzebub, how much more will they call those of his household? Therefore do not fear them, for there is nothing covered that will not be revealed, and hidden that will not be known. Whatever I tell you in the dark, speak in the light, and what you hear in the ear, preach on the housetops. And do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul, but rather fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a copper coin, and not one of them falls to the ground apart from your Father's will? But the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Do not fear, therefore, you are of more value than many sparrows. Therefore, whoever confesses me before men, him I will also confess before my Father who is in heaven. But whoever denies me before men, him I will also deny before my Father who is in heaven. Do not think that I came to bring peace on the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be those of his own household. And he who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And he who does not take his cross and follow after me is not worthy of me. And he who finds his life will lose it, and he who loses his life for my sake will find it. He who receives you receives me, and he who receives me receives him who sent me. He who receives a prophet in the name of a prophet shall receive a prophet's reward, and he who receives a righteous man in the name of a righteous man shall receive a righteous man's reward. And whoever gives one of these little ones only a cup of cold water in the name of a disciple, assuredly I say to you, he shall by no means lose his reward. Anybody else?
All right. Okay, anybody have any comments, thoughts on the words of Yeshua here? Go ahead, Brother Nathaniel.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
And whoever gives one of these little ones only a cup of water in the name of a disciple, assuredly I say to you, he shall by no means lose his reward. What does that mean?
So whatever you
Only
do,
a cup.
whatever you do, Yeshua says, whatever you do for the least of these, you've done it for me, right? And he's saying that
Yeah.
even if you give them a cup of cold water to drink, in the name of one of his students, even, that you won't lose your reward. He's showing us the heart of loving your neighbor as yourself, you know, and to do that is to guard Torah. That is, you know, that and loving Yah with all of our heart, soul, and might. He's saying even in the name of one of my students, if you give somebody a cup of cold water, one of my students in their name, even, that you're not going to lose your reward. That's pretty powerful. Brother Nathaniel, did you have something on that?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. No, I don't have something on that. My topic is a little different. So if you want to continue on that thread, or if someone else has something on that, maybe I can go behind, and I can say something afterwards, unless you don't mind shifting.
Yeah, go ahead, brother. I think we're good.
Okay. All right. I find verse 23. Well, I'll start first with verse 6. 5 and 6. Do not go into the way of the nations. Do not enter into the city of Samaria, but go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And then later on in verse 23, it speaks about and when they persecute you in this city, flee to another. For truly I say to you, you shall by no means have gone through the cities of Israel before the son of Adam comes. Talking about an evangelizing work is what that is. You see, essentially he's talking about I'm sending you out in verse 16, and that they're to be beware of men that are going to deliver them up, men who are connected to maybe traditions that are being exposed in various forms of false worship. And so in verse 17, you see these types of people, bringing them to the Sanhedrins and flogging them in the congregation. So these are believers they're being persecuted by, and then you see them going before, what we would call great men in our world today. And then you see that there's kind of like a division. You see him talking about a division, as in like maybe amongst the even close people, possibly that his word which is separating that. But then in verse 23, it all wraps up that until that we go through these cities and find the children of Yisrael or the evangelizers, that he won't return. So he's kind of waiting on us to finish doing the work, is kind of, or for the fullness of the nations to fulfill. You know what I mean? And so I kind of see again the prophecies in like Deuteronomy chapter 30, 29 and 30. You see Moshe warning the people that you're about to enter into the land, and then in chapter 32, he writes them a song for the very purpose of prolonging their stay in the land. But eventually the prophecy states that they're going to be vomited out because they didn't listen to the words spoken there at Mount Sinai. And then those children's descendants will one day realize, why are all these curses coming upon us? And then they will realize it's because, their ancestors turned away. And then it talks about those, that amongst lots of other scriptures talks about, those children of Israel amongst the other people called out, that are not of, the fold by the name of Yeshua, that are being brought in. So we kind of see some fulfillment going on here, and some more foreshadowing for the constant theme that we see throughout the scriptures of this evangelizing work that needs to be done, and going out and finding these lost sheep, which is what he says in Matthew 15, 23. I was not sent except for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And I just really see that stand out and bold to me, and kind of connect with the rest of the theme of the scriptures. And it is really important. One last thing, it is really important, and we all sometimes we can go through various degrees of heat that we feel, that fire, that zeal that we have. Sometimes we can the life's the thorns of the life sometimes try to choke us out, and we got to remember to follow the Shema, that when we're rising up and and laying down and walking out amongst the way and talking about it, and wrapping it around our deeds, around our hands, and keeping it on our mind is like frontlets, and we need to get this evangelizing work. So I encourage all of us, and myself, to just make sure, just the little times you're standing in line, you say something, who knows what a little spark, even a couple sentences can do that sparks someone and can bring them back. And so we just make sure that we all do that, because it's fulfilling prophecy, because he's waiting for this fullness to happen before he can return. And so essentially, in a way, we all kind of are responsible for that. So this is more things we need to be aware of.
Thank you, brother. Very well said. Very well said. Brother Max, you want to share something on that?
Yeah, just to follow on the heels of what our brother just said, it is actually relates exactly to what we just read. In my Aramaic, English Aramaic scriptures here, verse 38. What was just read in the other translation says, anyone who does not take up his cross and come and follow me is not worthy of me. But according to the information I have here, the word cross was inserted by the, not known exactly when, but it's not found in any of the early translations of Greek or Aramaic or otherwise. Not found in any of the early translations. The original word it was put there was staff. Anyone that does not take up his staff and come and follow me, and staff is a symbol of authority. So what's being said there is that we are of our own responsibility, our own authority to make the choice to follow Yah or not to follow Yah, and it is upon each and every one of us as individuals to be responsible for that, which is exactly what was just being said by our brother that I don't know who it was, but 619, the phone. Anyway, what he was talking.
It's Nathaniel or Nate.
Nathaniel. Yeah, just exactly what you were saying about the responsibility of those in Israel, not only in the desert but also when they came into the land. You know, this puts it upon ourselves that we have this task that our staff, our symbol of authority, is to come back on each one of us. We are each responsible. You can't point to somebody else and say it was your fault I didn't make it. It's our own.
So that's interesting what you shared about that, and I've heard that before about the staff, instead of the cross. But I do find it interesting too that right after he says that, he says, "He who has found his life shall lose it, and he that has lost his life for my sake shall find it." And so to me, I do see, not trying to over symbolize the cross here in this, but I do see this call that whether it's a staff or a cross or what, whatever that object might be, but if we're following him, he did ultimately, he was ultimately hung and nailed, to that stake, to the cross, and so if he lost his life, and no servant is greater than his master, then we have to understand this covenant that we've entered into is a covenant of suffering. No servant is greater than his master, and those that seek to try to save their life, to preserve it by their own hand, are going to lose it. And so I just find that to be, I think that we could talk about that word stake or cross or being a staff, but I think ultimately it still is saying the same thing, that in that very next verse, that if we're following him, it could mean that we've got to follow him even unto death. And that is going to be, the portion of many in the remnant in the last days. That's going to be their portion, and it's not a pleasant thing. But every one of his students, every one of his taught ones, except for Yochanan dying in exile on the island of Patmos, but he was tortured though. He was tortured. They tried to kill him. He didn't die. But I mean, every one of his students. And so it's not, for those that are closest to him, it doesn't seem that the odds are in your favor, for necessarily having a long, wonderful, easygoing life, and it's not promised to us. So we have to be mindful of that. And I also want to point out one other thing here that I've kind of seen some people stumble over. Okay, when it says into whatever house you enter, you eat what they put before you. In fact, this whole passage that we've read here from Matthew chapter 9:35 all the way through 11:1, this is kind of like the parallel passage from Luke chapter 10 as well. So they're one and the same, essentially, the same dialogue with Yeshua. And I've seen a few brothers and sisters or people stumble with this, that, whatever they put before you, you eat it. The worker is worthy of the food, and this kind of thing. And it says a little bit more along those lines in Luke chapter 10, the parallel passage of this. But get this, I've seen this kind of stumbling block here where it says, because it says we need to eat what they put in front of us, that means that it's somehow permissible to eat unclean flesh or swine flesh, especially as it relates to doing the work of evangelism or outreach. And I just want to point out that is absolutely categorically false. That there's nothing in these scriptures that we can glean that would lead us to believe that we can eat unclean meats in order to try to reach somebody for the kingdom. In the same way that we wouldn't commit any other sin in order to reach somebody for the kingdom, we shouldn't do that by putting unclean flesh in our bodies either. And I want to point out that the same passages that Nathaniel was pointing out earlier, he says in verse 5, it says, Yeshua sent these 12 out, having commanded them, saying, do not go into the way of the nations, and do not enter a city of the Shomonim, but rather go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Now we see Yeshua going into places where the Gentiles are. We see him going in among the Gadarenes and the cities of some of these Gentile cities. He did go into and he ministered to. In fact, the demoniac that had legion possessing him became one of the first shelakim, one of the first sent ones of the good news of the kingdom in the scriptures. Because when he casts legion out, that man asks if he can follow him, if he can go with him, and Yeshua specifically tells him to stay and remain where he is, and go and tell all of the people what he has witnessed, and he does. So Yeshua is not saying that they're not going to be ministering to Gentiles. He's telling them to go primarily to the Yehudim first, to find the lost sheep of the house of Israel in those cities first. And that's what it says later on. Shaul kind of confirms that in Romans chapter 1, to the Jew first, and then to the Gentile or the Goy. And so, but getting back to the unclean meats, if they were going into cities of the Yehudim, they would not be served unclean meat. They would not be served swine flesh. And so this was not going to be even an issue for them, that they would have to go into the house of someone who is a son of peace, someone who's worthy, in verse 13. And if the house is worthy, let your shalom come upon it. But if it is not worthy, let your shalom return to you. Whoever does not receive you nor hear your words when you leave that house or city, shake off the dust from your feet. So they are entering into the homes of people who know Torah. The same group of people who Shaul is writing letters to, who already know Torah, right? And so they're not going to go into a house of some quote-unquote believer and be served up swine flesh and be expected to eat it, or else the person that's serving is going to be offended, and we might not be able to be a good witness to them. That's foolishness. It's a false understanding of these words of Yeshua in Matthew 10 and in Luke 10. And we need to be careful with that stumbling block with some of these newer believers that might stumble over that. Try to help them see that, because that is not how we reach lost people or people that need to be reached. We don't reach them for the kingdom by compromising on the principles and the instructions in Torah. Yes, that's important to note that here. Okay. I'm not sure who had their hand up first, but let's go to Brother Daniel. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, I agree. The scriptures repeatedly say that all scripture is in agreement, and that all scripture is given by the mouth of Yah.
Thank you, Brother Chris. I have a comment, and I want to go back to this. Sorry, I couldn't raise my hand up, so I put it in the chat room. I want to go back to what we read. Then Yahushua said to the disciples, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross and follow me. I just want to add to that. when we compare that to the Torah, first of all, the word cross is Strong's 47:16, and that word means staros, okay? And that is from a stake, a post. That means a stake or post, a pole. And then also also attached to Strong's 24:76, and which is to establish, to set, to stand still, and then it's attached to Strong 5087, which means to sink down, to settle, to put. So we see this is something that, which in Hebrew altogether represents the tent peg. And what is the tent peg for? To set, to make still, to put down, to a pole, a stake. And that is your life, your tent. Who picked up his tent peg? Who picked up his home? Who picked up everything that he has? Which the tent peg is used to hold down the home, the house, your living, where you are. So when you remove that and you pick it all up, when you remove your security, you remove your peg, your life, which from being still where it's at, and you pick it up like Abraham did. He said, so. And to follow him, what did the Israelites do in the wilderness? Every time they after they settle, they follow the pillar of the cloud by day and the fire by night. They pick up, and when it moves, it moves. So when we see Yahusha in the New Testament, doing the same thing, and he's moving, and he says, "Follow me." Well, that's going to cost you. It's going to cost you to take that pole out. Take that thing that stands still, that is still, that thing that is set, that thing that is holding you still. You're going to have to take that tent peg. You're going to have to remove it and pick up your entire life and follow him. And you're going to have to leave everything behind. So it is a cost. And that's why the disciples said, we have left everything. We have picked up our tent peg. We've taken up our cross. And I don't know why they put the word cross there, but that is actually the stake. And then you can see our Messiah at the end. He was fasting. That pole was fastened to the ground, but his life was placed on it. He gave up his life right on the same tent peg. So it's just amazing how the whole thing comes together. And that's what we're doing right now too. We've taken up our life. We've come out of the churches. We've come out of our family. We've come out of everything. We've taken up our life, everything we have. If he says move, we move. Go, we go to where we can be and be able to keep the Torah, away from our families, away from everything, because we want to follow Messiah, which following him is going to cost us everything, to the point where he says, if you do not hate your mother and your father, what does that mean? You detest their way of worship, which actually interferes with your way of worship, because he would not mix holy with profane. So you have to pick up that whole thing. You have to lay it aside. That doesn't mean you hate mom and dad, but you actually, leave their way of worship, their mentality behind, which is a thorn in your flesh, and actually pick up your life and follow the living Torah. And it's a beautiful story of just following him. And that's
Amen. Amen, Jacob.
Very good. All right, Sister Carolina.
It was thank you, Brother Jacob, for saying that. Thank you. What the question I have is right in the beginning of chapter 10, when Yeshua gave his disciples the authority to drive out unclean spirits and heal every kind of disease and weaknesses. I being for so long with the Pentecostal church, just so I want to hear from you guys, how. Today we don't have time to say that. Like maybe have a study where you could teach us how to do this according to the Torah.
It's good that you bring that up, sister, and it's a very, very important aspect of our walk and the spiritual warfare that's going on around us. Brother Jason had mentioned that as something we should study on one of our midweek studies as well. So I would say that with you mentioning that too, that it's a second witness to it, and we need to do it. So so let's do that, and it's quite an in-depth topic, but I will say that it's something that we need to be aware of, and we need to look to Yeshua for how that works, and not some author of a book, or some traveling evangelist from like a tent revival, but from what Yeshua does and how he does it and the authority that he speaks in. And I'll just give you an example, just a quick example. But I see a lot of this in the charismatic movement, where when they go to do deliverance, when they minister deliverance to people, they start to speak in tongues. They lay hands and they speak in tongues, and everybody in the whole group starts to speak in like a gibberish, tongues over the person, all of them. And I don't see anywhere where Yeshua ever spoke in tongues to deliver people from demons or spirits. He speaks plainly to it, and he commands it to go, and it leaves. He doesn't sit there and speak in an unknown tongue or in tongues in order to have spirits come out, and especially not a whole group of people getting worked up into a hysteria or anything like that. So that's a whole other subject there, that we'll kind of get into there. But yeah, I appreciate you asking that, and we should definitely do that as a study here for the midweek study this coming week here. So that's great.
That's great. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and the other question I had was also about how to do the ministry, because he told his disciples to go from house to house, and I know that this in a different way. Jehovah Witness, they do it a certain way. They knock on people's doors. They go. I just wanted to hear if it's also the same study or maybe a different study, but I would love to study about this, because I have a lot of questions about how to do this, but far away.
Yeah, well, that would probably merit its own dedicated study as well, because there's a lot to that as well. But I will say this, that we have to be ready to take every opportunity that he gives us, and speak and share the gospel with people. And the opportunities are all around us, all the time, every day. Anytime we're around other people, we have opportunities. But it's easy to not see those when you're not used to doing that. When you're not trying to be intentional about it, you can go about your day after day after day into your routine, and you can be the most Torah following, set apart, dedicated believer in the Word, and living right and all that, but you can still get caught up in the routine and maybe miss some opportunities to share with others. And it is important, something Yeshua asked us all to do. Not just the 12, not just the 70 that are mentioned in Luke chapter 10, but all those who believe. And I think that some people kind of misunderstand some of the wording in the New Testament when it talks about gifting and all that, the gifts of the Spirit and all, and so they think, okay, well, that's not my gift to evangelize or reach out to other people. Uh, that is something that is follows all those that believe. All those who believe and follow Yeshua should be willing to share the faith, to share the good news of the kingdom with other people, and we have to do that. We have to do that even with people who aren't going to receive that good news well, because he just said that there in Matthew 10, didn't he? He said it. You got to tell them. In Luke 10, he says, "Tell them the kingdom of heaven has come near to you today, and whether they receive you or not, you tell them that. You share the gospel with them. It's not up to us for them to be saved, but we are the messengers, and we need to deliver the message. And we need to trust Yah that he is sowing those seeds and in good soil." I'm going to do this, brother Jason. You still with us there, brother? Hey, brother Jason, can you hear me, brother? He must not be able to get to his mic there. Okay, we'll come back to him in a minute. Brother Nathaniel, did you want to share anything on that as well?
Yeah, I got two things. One is something that I forgot to mention from the Torah portion, just really briefly. It's kind of a full court shot here. Chris, you recently just brought me into that movie, Finding the Mountain of Moses, and I just hated to read what we read today and just not mention that and try to connect that so that other people. So if anyone's listening and you're interested, you want to watch a 25-minute documentary. Chris brought this to me, and I share it because I think some stuff like this really builds faith. Not that we necessarily, in some cases need some physical, tangible proof, but it is really faith building to have, especially the fact that it's been, kept away and hidden. So it's Finding the Mountain of Moses. It's on YouTube. What we read today in Exodus 31, to where the 3,000 people died from the idolatry with the golden calf. In this month, they found a burial grave, a mass burial grave of approximately that number, just nearby, I think a few miles away from where that they believe that site on the golden calf is, at the base of Sinai. So if anyone wants to look at it, I think there's some overwhelming evidence that that's the case. I've seen patterns of evidence Exodus, which is really interesting on that, but that video on YouTube, Finding the Mountain of Moses, really highlights from specifically at the crossing of the Red Sea to Sinai, and they really show you the path and all that. So I wanted to share that. The other thing I was going to share was what you had mentioned about do not go into the way of the nations, do not enter into the city of Samaria, but go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And then you kind of touched on a point, because we know that it's to the Yahudim first, and then the nations, and that's how even judgment flows. When we're on the white throne, he judges his people first, he judges his house first, and then he judges those outside. And it's really a logical stance. It's not playing favorites. It's more of it represents hypocrisy if you do it the other way around. If you go and try to fix the nations or judge the nations first when your house is a mess, then that represents hypocrisy. You can't. Look what happened with the nation of Israel when they went and Achan stole that the gold and the silver in the garment. What happened? They went against the city of Ai, and 36 men died, and the reason why, and then they went through it like a fault code, like an electrician would go through a faulty code. They went through all the tribes of Israel like a fault code, and found where the fault code, the family that had the fault code of sin, and then Achan came forth. But again, what that represents is that they couldn't go cleanse the land, the promised land, which is what they were doing. They couldn't go cleanse the promised land if they themselves weren't worthy of cleansing the promised land. They had to, their camp had to be set apart. And so when their camp was no longer set apart, now they're doing a level of hypocrisy. They're trying to cleanse the nations when they got a deceiver in their midst. And so he's not trying to say that the nations, don't go to them. He's just letting them know, hey, we got to take care of the house of Israel first, and when they don't hear, then we go to the nations, because that's just the way it is. It's cause and effect. That's just the order, and that's the way that it is, and that's Yahuwah supports that, because it's logical. It makes sense.
Yeah, and there's also sometimes people get this idea that there's like different dispensations in the scripture. They call it dispensationalism or whatever, and that at this time Yeshua was kind of changing things up, and what he was doing was he's bringing more clarity to things. But we know that this idea of going to the goyim, or the nations, or the Gentiles, is not necessarily a new concept here as of the time of Yeshua walking and talking and teaching here. Because if you go to Isaiah 56 verses 3 through 8, this is critical to understand too, because some people take those passages we just read in Matthew 10 and a couple others, they verse pluck them, and they try to use that to say that, we're not even supposed to be witnessing to Gentiles or whatever. But especially some that are putting a prominence on certain races or ethnicities as being Yah's chosen, and so there's no, like everybody else is Edomites or whatever. But it says in Isaiah 56, verse 3, and let not the son of the foreigner who has joined himself to Yah speak, saying, Yah has certainly separated me from his people. Nor let the eunuch say, look, I am a dry tree. For thus said Yah to the eunuchs who guard my Sabbaths, and have chosen what pleases me, and are holding on to my covenant, to them I shall give in my house and within my walls a place and a name better than that of sons and daughters. I give them an everlasting name that is not cut off. And verse 6 says, also the sons of the foreigner who join themselves to Yah, to serve him and to love the name of Yah, to be his servants, all who guard the Sabbath and not profane it, and are holding on to my covenant. Them I shall bring to my set-apart mountain, and let them rejoice in my house of prayer. Their ascending offerings and their slaughterings are accepted on my slaughter place. For my house is called a house of prayer for all the peoples. The Master Yah, who gathers the outcasts of Israel, declares, I gather still others to him besides those who are gathered to him. So he just said in verse 8, this is coming from the mouth of the Most High. He says, the Master Yah, who gathers the outcasts of Israel, declares, I gather still others to him besides those who are gathered to him. So it is really, it is not accurate to say that you have to be one of those lost tribes in order to be the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Because you can also be a Gentile, a Goy that has no ethnic or genetic ties whatsoever to any of the 12 tribes of Israel, but you can still be gathered to him, and Yeshua confirms as much in John chapter 10, verse 16. That whole chapter of John 10 is amazing, but in verse 16 he says, Yeshua says, and other sheep I have, which are not of this fold. I have to bring them as well, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one flock, one shepherd. And if you want one more passage for that, just on that note, Acts chapter 10, Kepha gets this vision from Yah, of unclean animals on a sheet. 3 times he says, no, I've never eaten what's unclean or common. A lot of people like to interpret his vision for him and say we can eat whatever we want now. Here's what Peter has to say about it. Acts 10, 34 and 35. And opening his mouth, Kepha said, truly I see that Elohim shows no partiality, but in every nation he who fears him and works righteousness is accepted by him. Brother Daniel, go ahead.
Yeah, 2 things to add to what Jason was saying. Yeshua in the Brit Hadasha said, why do you look at the speck? Why do you offer to take out the speck in your brother's eye? First, take the log out of your own eye. And concerning the tongues, the Talmudim were understood by those surrounding the house. It wasn't necessarily the tongues of angels as some of the more charismatic slash Pentecostals would claim.
All right, Brother Nathaniel, did you have something else too?
Yeah, I was just going to ask what scripture was that you the one about bringing them into their Sabbaths in the nations in Isaiah? What was that?
Isaiah 56 verses 3 through 8. That whole passage, and there's a little bit of a chiastic formatting of the text there. It's because he starts out in verse 3 talking about the son of the foreigner, first, and then he jumps to the subject of a eunuch doing the same thing, and then he talks about the eunuchs who keep his Sabbaths and all these things, and then he says what he'll do for them, and then he goes back to the sons of the foreigner in verse 6. So it's really, you really have to read them together. But Isaiah 56 verses 3 through 8 especially, but that entire chapter is amazing. And it goes right along with what Yeshua says in John chapter 10. And of course, what Peter shows the meaning of his vision is in Acts 10, verse 34 and 35. So,
yeah, that's very nice to see someone use. Well, I would say it's very nice to see someone use that sword play of Acts 10 and 11 properly. But you know, that he did commission, you know, Apostle Paul to go to the nations. So there's just so much evidence. Some people just they hold on to, you know, their traditions rather than the word of, you know, the word of Elohim that plainly, you know, directs us. So it's clear for those who have an understanding of truth.
That's also that passage from Isaiah 56 is also a great one to share with people that are caught up in the church culture, that are having trouble seeing the you know, kind of seeing the way there. And but anyway, let's go on to let's move on to the next passage there in Book of Acts chapter 7 verses 35 through chapter 8 verse 1. This is where Stephen is giving his discourse about Moshe and the things that happened, and tying that in with the present day false teachers and everything. And so, would someone like to read that for us, please, that hasn't read yet? Maybe somebody hasn't read yet. Acts chapter 7 verses 35 through chapter 8 verse 1. Just want to give everybody a chance to read if you want. All right, somebody who has read that wants to read this one?
Which one are we reading now?
The book of Acts chapter 7, starting in verse 35, and then we're going to go to chapter 8, verse 1.
No one reads it, I'll read it.
All right, go ahead. Okay, are you still there, sister? Sister Caroline, are you still there?
Her picture's still on the participants list.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. I'll just go ahead and read it. Acts chapter 7, verse 35.
Oh.
Okay, you're back? Okay, gotcha.
I was talking, but it was mute, so you guys couldn't hear me. Sorry. Is anybody else reading? I don't mind.
No, you go ahead. You got it pulled up. Go ahead. CJB, right?
Okay. So 7:35 to 8:1, right?
Yes, that's right.
This Moshe whom they rejected, saying, "Who made you a ruler and judge?" is the very one whom God sent as both ruler and ransomer by means of the angel that appeared to him in the thorn bush. This man led them out, performing miracles and signs in Egypt, at the Red Sea, and the wilderness for 40 years. This is the Moshe who said to the people of Israel, "God will raise up a prophet like me from among your brothers." This is the man who is in the assembly in the wilderness, accompanied by the angel that had spoken to him at Mount Sinai, and by our fathers, the man who was given living words to pass on to us. But our fathers did not want to obey him. On the contrary, they rejected him, and their hearts turned to Egypt, saying to Aharon, "Make us some gods to lead us, because this Moshe who led us out of Egypt, we don't know what has become of him." That was when they made an idol in the shape of a calf and offered a sacrifice to it and held the celebration in honor of what they had made with their own hands. So Adonai turned away from them and gave them over to worship the stars, as has been written in the book of the prophets. People of Israel, it was not to me that you offered slaughtered animals and sacrifices for 40 years in the wilderness. No, you carried the tent of Molech and the star of your god Raphan and the idols you made so that you could worship them. Therefore, I will send you into exile beyond Babel. Our fathers had the tent of witness in the wilderness. It had been made just as God, who spoke to Moshe, had ordered it made, according to the pattern Moshe had seen. Later on, our fathers who had received it brought it in with Yehoshua when they took the land away from the nations that Adonai drove out before them. So it was until the days of David. He enjoyed God's favor and asked if he might provide a dwelling place for the God of Yaakov. And Shlomo did build him a house, but Ha Elyon does not live in places made by hand. As the prophet says, heaven is my throne, says Adonai, and the earth is my footstool. What kind of house could you build for me? What kind of place could you devise for my rest? Didn't I myself make all these things? Stiff-necked people with uncircumcised hearts and ears, you continually oppose the Ruach HaKodesh. You do the same things your fathers did. Which of the prophets did your fathers not persecute? They killed those who told in advance about the coming of the Tzaddik, and now you have become his betrayers and murderers. You, who received the Torah as having been delivered by angels, but do not keep it. On hearing these things, they were cut to their hearts and ground their teeth at him. But he, full of the Ruach HaKodesh, looked up to heaven and saw God's Shekinah with Yeshua standing at the right hand of God. Look, he exclaimed, I see heaven open and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God. At this, they began yelling at the top of their voices so that they wouldn't have to hear him. And with one accord, they rushed at him, threw him outside the city, and began stoning him. And the witnesses laid down their coats at the feet of a young man named Shaul. As they were stoning him, Stephen called out to God, Lord Yeshua, receive my spirit. Then he kneeled down and shouted out, Lord, don't hold this sin against them. With that, he died. And Shaul gave his approval to his murder. Starting with that day, there arose intense persecution against the Messianic community in Jerusalem. All but the emissaries were scattered throughout the regions of Yehuda and Shomron.
Okay, so right there we see already a fulfillment or partially fulfillment of what Yeshua is saying in Matthew chapter 9 verse 35 that we just covered all the way through 11:1. He tells them what's going to happen, that they're going to be scattered, they're going to be given up, they're going to be given over to the Sanhedrin and brought before kings. And this is already starting to happen here, and in this passage that she just read. Does anybody have any thoughts, comments, questions on this passage from the book of Acts? All right, Brother Nathaniel?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I'll take an obscure reference here. There's so much material to take from, and so I'd like to look at Acts 7:44, and then just kind of elaborate on some deeper stuff here. It says the tent of witness, which was with our fathers in the wilderness, as he appointed, instructing Moshe to make it according to the pattern that he had seen. Now, what we constantly have is we have Moshe given, instructions to not just make items according to the pattern, but also to fashion the people the kingdom, if you will, which is, made up of, droplets of water, which is like a kingdom like an ocean, and droplets of water like the individual people. And we are to, be molded essentially. And we are to be molded according to the pattern that, the scriptures lays out, before us. But we constantly see, man, or Satan, if you will, ultimately trying to change the pattern that is there. So a couple scriptures that I wanted to bring up that would link with that is one is Philippians 3:17, become joint imitators of me, brothers, and look at those who so walk as you have us for a pattern. So here, it's that pattern that we see. And then we also have, like in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, let me find where that is here. So there it is, 2 verse 15. It's talking about, so then, brothers, stand fast and hold the traditions which you were taught, whether by word or by our letter. Again, these aren't the traditions of man that break the word of Elohim. These are the traditions that were spoken to Moshe and that was given to the people. And so the traditions that was given, the pattern, not just necessarily in items, like a menorah, in Exodus 26, it says to make it according to the pattern, and then people stick 2 extra candle pieces on either side to try to, change the pattern and say that that's set apart or something. Just what have you. You constantly see people changing the pattern, and even in Acts of Stephen, the chapter before this, what we read in chapter 6. It says that in 6:11, it says that they instigated men to say. So these are false accusations. We have heard him speaking blasphemous words against Moshe and Elohim. And they're trying to. Verse 14, it says, for we have heard him saying that this Yeshua of Nazareth shall overthrow this place and change the institutes which Moshe delivered unto us. So you see these false accusations of changing the pattern, yet what is it that they're doing? They themselves are changing the pattern of Moshe, and we are being told to keep to it. So I know it's a little obscure to pick on Acts 7:44, and in talking about the pattern that they had seen, talking about the tent of witness, but it's kind of a greater thing too, is you see what Stephen is saying ultimately in the whole chapter 7 is he's letting them know that you changed the pattern. You don't even know who it is you worship. He doesn't even reside in a house built by man. He built everything. We are his footstool. And so he's letting them know that, like, they're the ones guilty of all the very same things that they're accusing him of. And so I just see 744 as kind of like a small little grain of sand in a larger beach of problems throughout the scriptures of changing the pattern that not just was given to us through Moshe, but the pattern of Yeshua, who, as Malachi 3:6 says, that he doesn't change.
Very good, brother. I appreciate that. Very good. Anybody else on Acts, on the passage from Acts here? Okay, let's go on to 2 Corinthians chapter 3. It's all 18 verses. 2 Corinthians chapter 3. Anybody who hasn't gotten a chance to read yet?
Pardon me, Chris. Does my fan bother my speaking?
I can hear you fine.
All right, if you want, I can read that. Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead, brother. Thank you. 2 Corinthians.
All right. As usual, I'm usually reading from the New American Standard Version, so I'm reading to verse 18. Are we beginning to commend ourselves again, or do we need, as some letters of commendation to you or from you? You are our letter written in our hearts, known and read by all men. Be manifested that you are a letter of Christ, cared for by us, written not with ink, but with the Spirit of the living God, not on tablets of stone, but on tablets of human hearts. And such confidence we have through Christ towards God, not that we are adequate in ourselves to consider anything as coming from ourselves, but our adequacy is from God, who also made us adequate as servants of a new covenant, not of the letter, but of the Spirit. For the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life. But if the ministry of death in letters engraved on stones came with glory, so that the sons of Israel could not look intently at the face of Moses, intently on the face of Moses, because of the glory of his face, fading as it was, how shall the ministry of the Spirit fail to be even more with glory? For if the ministry of condemnation has glory, much more does the ministry of righteousness abound in glory. For indeed, what had glory in this case has no glory on account of the glory that surpasses it. For if that which fades away was with glory, much more that which remains is in glory. Having therefore such hope that we use great boldness in our speech, and are not as Moses, who used to put a veil over his face, that the sons of Israel might not look intently at the end of what was fading away. But their minds were hardened, for until this very day, at the reading of the old covenant, the same veil remains unlifted, because it is removed in Christ. But to this day, whenever Moses is read, a veil lies over their heart. But whenever a man turns to the Lord, the veil is taken away. Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. But we all, with unveiled face, beholding, as in a mirror, the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as from the Lord, the Spirit.
All right, thank you, brother. Anybody have any thoughts on this from Shaul's letter here? Basically, it's correlating back to the aspect that we read earlier about Moshe's face being having shown after being in the presence of Yah face to face.
If you could please explain this chapter, most of it I don't understand.
Okay, so he brings up this, what we read earlier about how when Moshe was up there, he came down and his face was shining, and he's showing us that at the end here that the crux of this chapter, this passage is, and we all, as with unveiled face, we see as in a mirror the esteem of Yah, are being transformed into the same likeness from esteem to esteem as from Yah, the Spirit, the Ruach. So, in other words, like when Moshe went up there and spoke with Yah and deliberated and made intercession for the people, when he came back from that, his face was like shining. We were talking about that earlier. It wasn't shining because of anything that he did. It was shining because of the presence of Yah. That Moshe, in a sense, had been transformed. And having more esteem on him because of the esteem of Yah. It had an effect on him, if you will. There was kind of a transference onto him. And we see something similar to a degree when Yah says to gather the 70 elders of Israel. Moshe gathered them, and it says, I'm going to take some of my Ruach from you and pour it out on them. There's kind of a transference there, or transformation there. And so, just like Moshe, we are being transformed as well into the same likeness as Yah through Yeshua. And this is something that says in the beginning that, Elohim says, let us make man in our image, in our likeness. Brother John, you have anything on that?
Actually, my thing was more on just a particular word in that verse 17, right, where it's the last word. I said liberty, right? We should probably use freedom instead, but my version said the word liberty.
Yeah, my version says freedom there. Yeah, I understand that.
I think freedom's better. Freedom's better because that other word, the other word probably has maybe a negative Latin meaning behind it.
Yeah, it could be. I think, libertas or whatever, goddess or whatever. But anyway, yeah, when we use that as an English word, I understand what people are meaning by it. So, anybody, Sister Carolina, was that okay, or you want a clarification on anything else in there?
Yeah, thank you for saying that. Yeah, the other part that I don't understand is the essence of which is not a written text, but the spirit. For the written text brings death, but the spirit gives life. And what does that mean? Because I heard what that means in other denominations, but what does, from your perspective, what that does that mean? Because it's so confusing.
So it's kind of going back up here to verse 7, but if in my version it says, this may be a little easier to understand in my version, I don't know, but I'm going to read a little bit of this. But if the administering of death in letters, in writing, engraved on stones, was esteemed, so that the children of Israel were unable to look steadily at the face of Moshe because of the esteem of his face, which was passing away or fading away, how much more esteemed shall the administering of the Spirit not be? For if the administering of condemnation had esteem, the administering of righteousness exceeds much more in esteem. For indeed, verse 10, for indeed what was made esteemed had no esteem in this respect, in view of the esteem that excels. It is an advanced way that he writes here. This is what Kepha tells us in 2 Peter, chapter 3, 15 through 18. He does write in an advanced way. You got to kind of, but it gives one pause to think and consider what he's saying. For if that which is passing away was esteemed, much more that which remains in esteem. Let's see here. And then skip down to verse 14 for a second. Well, because at 13 is talking about him putting on the veil on his face, right? And then 14 says, but their minds were hardened, for to this day, when the old covenant is being read, that same veil remains, not lifted, because in Messiah it is taken away. But to this day, when Moshe is being read, a veil lies on their heart. And when one turns to the Master, the veil is taken away. That's referring back to Exodus 34. But whenever Moshe went in before Yah to speak with him, he would remove the veil until he came out. And when he came out, he spoke to the children of Israel what he had been commanded. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts on that, but it does correlate with what we read there in Exodus 34. So. The translation he was reading used the word glory. The scriptures uses the word esteem, which is probably a better word, but the word in Hebrew would be kavod. Esteem or glory is kavod in Hebrew. And I think your translation, the CJB, when you were reading earlier, Acts chapter 7 through 8 verse 35 to 8:1, I heard your version use the word Shekinah, and that it's interesting that CJB uses that in that place, because that the Hebrew word Shekhinah is not found anywhere in the Tanakh at all. It's the word kavod. So I find that interesting too. Not to get too far off on a tangent on the actual.
That's very interesting. Wow, I didn't know.
Sister Mary, go ahead.
Yeah, because yeah.
Is that not also referring to the veil that was torn when Jesus, on the cross, when I'm reading from the King James Version, when he passed away, when Yeshua passed away, the veil was torn?
I see the veil that Moshe wore over his face as kind of a type of that, because he was in such direct communion, he was in such direct communication and the presence of Yah, that some of that esteem from Yah, like imprinted on Moshe's face to the point where it's like it's shining too. And so, he puts a veil over his face to kind of hide that, in a similar way to how the esteem or the kavod of Yah is hidden behind the veil. I see a correlation there. And of course, yes, Yeshua came and made an access. He made an access to Yah that hadn't existed since before the fall in the garden. Because remember that Yah used to walk and talk and speak with our Abba, Adam, and our mother Hawa, Adam and Eve, in the garden. He used to walk and talk with them in the cool of the evening and speak with them. And so, since that time that they ate of that fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, until the time of Yeshua, there essentially was this further degree of separation. And Yah was about to keep it like that. He was about to keep it. He was about to keep it further separated until Moshe made this intercession with him and asked him to come with them, is what we just read in the Torah portion today. Are you following me on that? So Yah was fed up with the children of Israel in the at the base of Mount Sinai. He's ready to just have them go on without him, and Moshe is basically pleading with him, please come with us, and making intercession in a similar way to how Yeshua would, in a greater way. All right, Sister Mary, you following that pretty good?
Yes, thank you, Chris.
All right, good. Okay, anybody else have any thoughts, comments, questions, anything on Corinthians or anything else we've covered today? It just has final thoughts before we wrap. Okay, we'll conclude our study here.